The meeting of the Dudley-Charlton Regional School Committee is now in session. It is Wednesday, September 12th. We're at the Shepherd Hill Regional High School. It is 7 p.m., and we will all stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting of Wednesday, August 8th. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just had one clarification on page 2 under A, the new business, the budget. Mr. Massey probably have to answer this one because I'm not sure if it's written correctly. The last sentence says, increasing the district budget by $106,000. We didn't really increase the budget. We just rearranged figures, didn't we? See the last sentence on the first paragraph under A on page 2. Roman numeral 7, new business.
Yeah, I
We
think
didn't really,
we didn't increase the budget
No.
overall.
No.
The revenue budget shifted.
Right, but that implies that we went up $106,000
Yeah,
to
no, we
me, so
did not
that should be
change the budget
fixed.
nor the assessments.
So we should either take that out or,
And we can never increase the budget.
no, that's why it's written,
One, yeah.
it sounds like we increased it, we just rearranged the figures,
Right.
basically.
That's correct.
Do we want to put that in there? Doesn't sound too good, rearrange the figures. We changed the,
We increased the regional transportation revenue budget by 106 and lowered our E&D usage.
so you know how to fix it, don't you? Just change the wording so it's correct. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of Wednesday, August 29th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? And we have two abstentions. All right, approval of the warrants. We do have warrants this evening, and they will be making their way around the table. Citizens Forum. Do we have anyone that would like to come to speak with us? Okay. Communications. Dr. Nash, do you have any communications?
I do not.
Okay. And how about our members? Go ahead.
Just to bring to everyone's attention that Commissioner Riley is attending the Mars Regional Schools meeting on October 10th. It's at Assabet Valley at 9:30 in the morning. There's been a request for a strong presence of regional members to discuss our particular issues regarding funding. So just wanted to see if people were available to put it on their calendar now. I know that I'm planning on attending.
What is the date again?
It's Wednesday, October 10th.
Okay.
At 9:30 in the morning. At Assabet, you'd go into the main door, and they'll have Morris people there for registration.
Okay, so we can let Sandy know if any of us are going. Any other communications?
I did get approached by a couple of parents at pickup time for Shepherd Hill, and they wanted me to speak to how fast the student drivers are going out of the parking lot. And it's making it difficult for them to pick up kids out of the schools, and it's a little bit dangerous for everyone. So I just wanted to bring that up, and maybe you can take a look at that. Okay, so I was approached by a couple of parents who are concerned because the student drivers are leaving Shepherd Hill in the afternoon after the buses at excessive speeds, and it's making it rather dangerous for the parents picking up their kids.
So he will check into it.
There's four of us out there, so
Yeah.
it's like a symphony if anyone's been there. So
I've seen it, yeah.
I just said, thank you. And I did get communications. It says, Dear Mrs. O'Coin, now that I have my new note cards, it is a better medium through which to, again, offer my thanks, this time to both you and the entire committee, for the beautiful commemorative chair. I will cherish it as I do my 18 years in the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. All the best for a successful and hopefully uneventful school year. Greg. And here's his new note cards.
Big A. And I also got a phone call about the heat situation and how well it was handled, but the question was brought up about looking at the calendar again. And I said, we do have a subcommittee on the calendar about starting after Labor Day and so forth. I said, we've discussed that many times, but they just wanted to say that's a topic they might want you to discuss again.
And any other communications? Okay. That brings us to superintendent's report. Dr. Nash?
Thank you, thank you. You'll see that I think I've finally gotten the hang of how I want to organize my reports so that you'll get two reports in your packet. One is the special topics, so those would be timely topics that I would intend to bring up, and that would be the first report. And the second one would really be the comments that I would make on agenda items, the new business agenda items. So I'll separate those out. So it'll be a little bit easier maybe to follow with that. Given the fact that we're going to have some discussion this evening, and I know the committee has already had some discussion around school safety, two reports recently came out that I've included in your packet. One is a state report and one is a national report. The first report is one that was produced this July, coming out of the Division of the U.S. Secret Service Department and their National Threat Assessment Task Force. That is entitled Enhancing School Safety Using a Threat Assessment Model and Operational Guide for Preventing School Violence. The second report was one that was done on a smaller scale, but I think timely in that it represents some reflections and some respondents' reflections, albeit a small group, under 400, from Elizabeth Warren, Senator Warren's office, and also Representative Catherine Clark's office, and that is the report that's titled Keeping Schools Safe, Perspectives from Massachusetts Educators and Families. I'm not going to go through all of the report because you certainly have them, you've read them, and I've provided a summary for you, but I would like to point out a couple of highlights that at least I noticed. I'm certainly sure that you picked up on as you were reading the first report, the national report. One of the things that was very clear when you start to read this is that this particular model really looks at the fact that when we start talking about threat assessments, particularly around students and trying to get a profile of the student who might potentially do harm or injury to other students and certainly staff, that what we recognize and what they say very clearly in this is there is no single profile of a student, and that part of their approach, and I think very detailed, is looking at establishing ways that establishing a threat assessment group, if you will, albeit the name that we call it, whatever, at each building to really begin to define some kinds of behaviors that students have and to be proactive in looking at threat assessments at the school level, not after they happen but before, and really focusing on students who may be at risk, behaviors, communications, all of that. And if you went through this document, you'd see that step 5, which is called Establish Assessment Procedures, is the longest section, and it really details what they would expect should happen with this group. I thought it was well done, extremely well done. To some degree, schools already have those groups. We have different names for them. We used to call them child study teams. We call them IST teams. We have all kinds of names. But to really go back and profile this group a little differently, oftentimes while we're talking about academic reasons that students don't succeed, social emotional reasons, we're not really digging into deeper into the communications, the profile of the student, the relationships the student has, the behaviors the student has with others, triggers that may have started, and that's what they're talking about. And then to develop management options for dealing with it. So it's similar to creating, if you will, a group who really specialize in looking at the profile of a student, particularly, who may, down the road, have the potential to do this. Again, it's not the panacea, it's not the answer, but it is something I think that really provides some thought about how we promote safe cultures and climates and how we can go about particularly being proactive in our own environments. The second report, which I thought was pretty interesting, although again, it only profiled a small number, a cross-section of individuals, a little less than 400, as I said, was conducted by both the senator and the representative to some degree to then initiate a letter back to the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, with respect to Massachusetts, if you will, views. And this particular survey that was sent out to this cross-section of individuals, including parents, teachers, administrators, superintendents, other district leaders, really asked individuals to look at and to rate the level of concern that they had with gun violence in schools. Not surprisingly, almost 88% of the individual respondents, regardless of what cross-section they represented, rated 4 or 5 their level of concern, with 5 being the highest. But the summary of findings, I think, that they found from, again, this small cross-section of individuals may reflect the feelings or the sentiments of others, a larger pool. And I'd like to read those, if I could, because there are only 4, and I think it's important. The first finding that the report or the survey relates is that Massachusetts stakeholders do support overwhelmingly policies that reduce access to firearms in schools. 70% of the respondents stated that expanding the number of guns in schools would make schools less safe. Respondents, however, were split, 57% in favor on whether to use federal, state, or local funds to place armed SROs, school resource officers, or security officials in K-12 schools. Not surprisingly, principals and superintendents were more in favor of that. The second finding was that Massachusetts stakeholders want federal lawmakers to strengthen gun laws that currently exist and to make access to firearms a lot more difficult. 68% of respondents felt that firearms and easy access contributed to gun violence, to no surprise. They also cited that ways to reduce gun violence should include things like universal checks, background check requirements, extended waiting periods, things that I certainly think all of us have talked about, heard about in the media. They also ranked the following 3 other gun control policies as top, and that would be banning military assault weapons, establishing a searchable database of gun sales, and raising, not reigning, excuse me, I apologize, a gun purchasing age from 18 to 21 years. The third summary of finding that this particular survey produced was that stakeholders believe that expanding or improving access to mental health services would make educational institutions safer, something that I think in many ways schools have begun to address in a lot more detail through social emotional learning. And obviously, as this dovetails back to this concept that's raised in the national report, the U.S. Secret Service, around creating threat assessment task force, if you will, within your buildings. And finally, Massachusetts stakeholders felt that schools should enhance building security, but did not consider it the solution to gun violence. 2 out of 3 respondents stated that enhancing building security would make a school safer, but only 57% felt that requiring training of staff, students, and other school administrators would reduce the risk of school-based gun violence. And only 43% agreed that using funds to purchase metal detectors and security cameras would be effective. Both the senator and representative sent a letter to the Secretary DeVos, Betsy DeVos, who was the Secretary of Education, outlining these findings, certainly because there has been much discussion more recently around increasing and allowing school districts across the country to use some of the federal funds that it receives to do some kinds of things regarding security measures. So we will see, but just wanted to make you aware of that. I know that we're going to be having some discussion later on, so I thought it was timely that you have this information because they're both pretty recent reports. And while one is broader in scope, the other one does give us a microcosm of Massachusetts stakeholders and how they may feel. So that's my
That
first part.
concludes- Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the Okay.
The second piece of this, and the principals are going to be talking in a few minutes, certainly in addressing some of the enrollment issues or information and class sizes that you have and they've provided for you. But I'd like to give you a broader perspective of this. This is information that the data specialist has provided to me and you have in your packet that gives you a little bit of a preview of where we are as we start the year. So you have 3 sheets in your packet. The first sheet that I would talk about is the sheet that profiles high school. I would mention that the enrollment comparisons that you will see, particularly in the second sheet, the third sheet, reflect the change from last June to this coming August 30th. So when you are looking at the information on the third sheet and you see numbers that are slash showing grade spans, so 130, 140, that first number reflects our enrollment at the end of June, and the second number reflects enrollment at the end of August of this year. So it's not a year-to-year, June to June, obviously, can't be. The first sheet shows you the high school, and I'll make a few comments about that, and if you have any questions, certainly the high school principal is here, and he can address them, and he'll be coming up anyway. High school and
Dr. Nash, this is the sheet that we have.
Oh.
So you're talking about the one that's in our electronic file?
it is.
Okay.
In your
Let's just
electronic
pull-
file,
Just want
yes.
to pull it up.
Thank you. It is a sheet that says Shepherd Hill Regional High School Student Enrollment Report by Town, August 30th, 2018. And I would simply point out to you that obviously, as my note says to you in my report, that you will see a drop in enrollment at the high school, even with school choice. Last year, our enrollment was 1,151 students as of June 30th. And this year, again, this is only as accurate as August 30th. We were at 1,115 students, so that is a difference of 36 students. The second sheet, and also on this sheet, you'll see the school choice by grades. The second sheet that you have provides new enrollments. And again, that may be in your, not electronic, or you may have a hard copy. Again, I would point out that we're looking at students who are new, obviously, to the district, who have enrolled in our district, have moved into the district in some capacity. You'll see some variations. Again, ninth grade to no surprise, 28 students being the top number. Many of those reflected certainly could be school choice. Mason Road also saw an influx at grade 1 of 11 new students. So if you look at this information, as my description indicates to you, that while it's not significant shifts of new students moving in, and certainly the comparative report, the third page, will show you actually the comparison between last year and this year. You'll start to see some patterns and trends begin to emerge with respect to total district population. But a little bit of a shift, not a lot. 11 students, something to watch. May be somewhat of an anomaly, maybe a year where this happens. Oftentimes, one year you get 10 students move into one grade, and then the next year, they seem to be spread out across a number of grades, particularly, you just can't profile that. The other thing, too, that's difficult, and I think the principals will talk to you a little bit about that, and Mrs. Pacheco will mention when you start talking about kindergarten numbers, it's difficult for us in any district to really project what those numbers will actually look like. As you know, we use census. We also do estimates above. We always project beyond that, but then again, you never know. There are people who show up, and that's the reality, and we just don't know until they show up. Even though we advertise, we publicize, we want them to come early on so we know what our numbers could be, and we could project better, but oftentimes that is not the reality.
I just have a question for the general public. Might have a question. If our enrollment is down 125, but we have 377 new students, could you explain why that looks wrong? You know what I mean? I know the preschool would be part of that and so forth, but the average person on the street might say, how can you say the enrollment's down when we have 377 new students?
I think the reflection that we have probably, and again, I'd have to go back and ask her how she does those numbers, do not include the pre-K and K. That would be my hunch. They consider those new, and I don't know if those are already counted in your total number, but I'd have to go back and find out how she prepares the report.
Plus more, depending on the graduating class and so forth, but it looks confusing
Right.
for the average person. So I think we should have more
It does.
information on that.
A question, how many school choice seats did we have opened at the Shepherd Hill?
I don't know what that vote would have taken
Right.
place prior to my coming on board. Was it
I'll check, I think it was 33.
34.
33?
Yes.
All right, 33, it looks like.
Are all our school choices, is that a word? All our school choice students have moved up to high school. Do we have any other school choice students still in the middle school that haven't gotten up to high school yet? Does anyone know that question? You know, like the fifth, we opened it,
This report shows those numbers.
so there are still people in the elementary, in the middle schools that haven't gotten into high school yet?
Just give us a second to get to that.
Any other questions?
I don't see school choice lower than grade 9.
I didn't either, that's why I was curious.
That one,
It's just the high school was listed there.
by class,
This one?
spreadsheet. It's marked.
I see some stuff.
Is it on the major chart?
It's on the major chart,
Okay.
Right.
and there's some in like Dudley Middle, there's in 6 and 7, you have 1 and 2.
Okay.
So you have 3 at Dudley Middle,
Okay, that's the bottom there?
12 at
12 at
Charlton
Charlton.
Middle.
Okay, I see that. Okay, just it wasn't on the other sheet with the high school one, that's why
But
it's
I
kept
don't,
on
I
the
don't see
spreadsheet.
any
That'll
elementary.
eventually
No, we never had the, we didn't have elementary, we never went that low.
That's where
So
your
are the,
school choice
in the lower grades, because we haven't
Yeah.
opened up school choice in lower grades for a couple of
Right.
years.
That's why I
Are
wanted to
Are
ask.
these because of teacher students that are coming in?
Yeah, so that'll eventually
considered school
disappear,
choice.
and it'll just be the high school,
They
school
wouldn't be,
choice.
they wouldn't be the students, teachers, students, they're not school choice.
Okay, so I guess my
It must be like a
question,
fifth grade that hasn't gotten up to ninth grade yet.
no, my question is, how do we have school choice students listed in fifth and sixth grade when we haven't opened up school choice seats in those grades in a couple of years? So if we've allowed students in under teacher contract, they're absorbed in and reported as a regular student.
Regular
Right.
student, right.
Okay, so I guess my question is, how do we have school choice students that are not at the high school, if they're not in fifth and sixth grade? We haven't opened up seats. I think the last time we opened up seats, it was in
Couple
seventh
years
and eighth
anyway.
grade.
And there'd be no fifth grade, because we know we didn't do it
Yeah.
last year.
Correct. So can we investigate that?
Unless they listed those incorrectly, the parents,
I don't know.
teachers, because that'd make a difference in funding.
So we're looking at school
Makes a big
choice.
It makes a big difference, so
Fifth
they,
and fifth grade, so go up to this.
We opened something at Heritage a couple of years ago.
Your
Might have
policy
been
states that,
grade
you know,
five,
every
possibly
May
middle.
you vote
We
respect
do.
and you identify the
1 and 2.
Grades.
The
grades.
grades.
This is 1 and
So
grade
unless,
5.
We stopped doing it a
And
couple
we-
years ago,
yeah.
we only do high school because
so
of
unless you had in the past identified lower than high
Yeah.
school.
Well, it
But the
would
fifth
be.
grade would not be the extra, we
We've
didn't do
never,
it
we've
for-
never in my tenure ever opened up school choice at 5th and 6th grade.
and never elementary either.
Well, we did fifth
We
grade,
did.
I
I
thought
remember
we
We did
that.
fifth grade, but they
We
were
did fifth
We
grade.
did do that,
couple
years
years ago.
3 years ago.
And
But
I
they did
thought
fifth
the
grade
seats
grade.
at
I know
Heritage
that.
We
that
wouldn't
we
have
opened.
I
anybody
know the
reported in
school
Well, it was
grade.
my, my kids' grade, so yeah, no, it
Yeah.
was 3 years ago.
Right.
Yep.
So,
Do you know if you opened it up at elementary and middle school, or
And we
just?
did 2 years ago.
So there you go,
Yeah.
elementary, so that's why
we
they're in
did
fifth grade.
a few
Would they
years
be in
back, so
fifth
they,
grade? What grade would they be in now, the youngest kid? Would they be in fifth grade by now?
The last of my school choice students just moved to middle school.
So that'd be a fifth grader, so there's your
Yeah.
fifth grader.
As well.
In my tenure, I don't remember opening
but
up
we did, we
Yeah, we
had,
did 2 years
I
ago.
remember opening it
in
up.
elementary.
At
to,
Heritage, it was only a couple of seats,
elementary.
yeah, I recall that.
Okay.
But
Can you
not
pull
in the
that up?
past 2 years, we
Not
stopped,
right there in fifth grade.
yeah.
With that.
But I even remember fifth grade, like you said,
Yeah, 7
I
years
remember
ago.
the fifth grade,
Yeah, we definitely did that.
yeah.
If you can come back to that. I know we've been very conscious about moving school
Right
choice
now,
out so that it's
right.
only at the high school level.
And we did that like 2 years ago, you know,
Right.
we said we weren't gonna do
Okay.
below the 9th grade anymore.
Are you all, it could be because I voted no for it if you put it up there. Sorry.
The last sheet shows a comparison, and shows it by grade spans, or by schools, if you will. The figure to the left will indicate what the enrollment was as we ended the school year in 17-18. So for example, if you're looking at Charlton Elementary School, and you're looking at grade 1, last year was 151, the incoming class 139. So you can see, you can start to see some patterns of swings. If you were to look at the school-wide increase, decrease column, you can start to see patterns emerge, not atypical of what we're seeing across the state with respect to declining numbers of students. Starting to see that obviously at the elementary level and then coming up through the upper grades. Slight uptick at Charlton Middle School, but you can see the, again, comparison to Dudley Middle School, which reflects a decrease of 31. Some of these ranges from the high school on down are significant and certainly worth watching as we move forward. Unfortunately, when we talk about 35 students in a high school programming, it's not the same when you talk about 35 students in grade 2, which is basically a class and a half. So, you know, people always want to say, well, you lost 35 students at the high school. Well, it doesn't necessarily impact the program because we don't run a high school that way. So I would just point that out for, not for the school committee because you know that, but certainly a lot of times I get questions, I used to get questions about that. Well, your enrollments are decreasing, particularly at the high school level, but we still have to run programs. And, you know, we offer a lot of courses to students, and that's really what happens. Those numbers may look a little bit different and decline a little bit in a course here or there, but overall, relatively, the impact is not the same as at an elementary school. So,
Excuse me, has any analysis been done on why the enrollment is decreasing at the high school?
to
particular?
my knowledge, unless you did one prior to my coming on board, I don't know. I'd have to go back to see whether this is a trend, you know, over those who have been on the committee certainly know whether in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years you've seen this happen. But obviously, you look at the fact that what happens to your 8th grade students, you know, at the end of 8th grade. Where are 8th grade students going? Are we losing, when are we losing them? Are we what percentage of students are leaving us? Has that increased or decreased over the years at the end of 8th grade? Typically, that's where you see your exodus, and then why. You know, we've, I think, started a lot of discussion, and particularly through the Director of Curriculum, and looking at how we better market what we offer at high schools. That's one of the things that I think has always been a concern, whether when a student makes a decision to attend, whether it's a private school a Catholic or whatever, or a Voc Tech school, they're making those decisions pretty early on in grade 8. And we tend, I think, across the board, and I'm not saying that it's happening at this district, but we tend to start marketing ourselves a lot later, and decisions sometimes are already made by 8th grade parents a lot sooner. I know that many times in Catholic schools, that decision has to be made by December. And oftentimes, we don't get programs of studies out and have some of our meetings until January and February, and that was always a concern that people raised, and rightly so. So I know we're having that discussion. Barbara has put together, our Director of Curriculum has put together actually a whole kind of I'll call it a quasi-marketing plan, and we've been talking about it actually as of today. We had a meeting, a secondary principals meeting, and Barbara led that to look at how we can do a better job of capturing, and when. And then I think you've got to look at doing some follow-up, potentially, with 8th grade parents. Some have very legitimate reasons why. The fit is better somewhere else. It's a religious reason. It's a family reason. My family has all gone to this school. I'm going to go to this school. It's a tradition. But I think we need to understand what those are, so.
Can I ask a question? And I don't know if this is part of the analysis that you're looking at. If you look at the enrollment at Dudley Middle School versus Charlton Middle School, Charlton Middle School has higher classes in 8th grade than Dudley does. But when you go to Shepherd Hill and you go to 9th grade, Dudley is substantially higher than Charlton. So there's almost a 50 student difference between those two. So I'm just curious as to whether or not that mirrors our students moving to Bay Path, if it's a higher number of Charlton students versus Dudley, or if that is an area where we have a missing piece of information as to why we're losing students. It seems to be heavier out of Charlton than in Dudley.
I think it is Bay Path. In the past,
Would
it
be
has
curious to see if it mirrors that, or whether or not kids are going off to a parochial school or something like that. I know we've lost students in the past because of sports, but it would help us with programming. We did last year was, I believe, we did adjust the time frame of the students being able to come over to Shepherd Hill was moved up until October, I believe. So that students were able to come over to the high school to see earlier what was here versus in the past it had waited later, and students had already begun their application processes other places.
I also have requests from the high school. In the past, we got the full master schedule of every student, every teacher with every class size. And I think that's helpful because if you have the average is 20, one teacher might have 40, and the other one could have, 20? Let's say the average is 20, and one's got 30, one's got 10. We don't see that here. Could you print up that master? We used to get the whole copy, because that tells you exactly what every class has. Because some people will say, my kid has 10 in the class, and is that true? And then you have the proof in front of you. So could you send that to us all?
They actually
Thank
are
you.
handing it in to me next week.
Oh,
so-
good, yeah.
That's
Like an
good,
update,
yeah.
yeah. That we can
That
see
was-
that it actually breaks down. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Is there any, from these numbers, are there any classes that are critically big in the elementary schools?
What we'll
Oh, is
do,
that
we'll
coming
get
up?
it from
It
the
is.
principals.
Okay,
It is.
okay.
And so I'm gonna,
Well,
Okay,
when the
all right.
principals come up,
Okay.
they'll give us their report.
Thank you.
question.
Does that conclude?
One other, you do have my last topic under is the student issue notification that I provided information to you on. We had a 10th grade student at the high school who was suspended for 10 days. You have that information for use of marijuana. And again, in accordance with the law, you know that the parent may appeal that to the superintendent as long as they do that in writing within 5 calendar days. I don't believe I've received anything as of this date. And that's my end of my special topics report.
Okay, thank you. And that brings us to new business. And the first discussion is the Charlton Middle School lighting. And Richard asked Mr. Packard to do some research, and I'll call him up, and you can tell us what you found out about the lighting.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So, I've been charged with the task of looking into this lighting situation, which has kind of been a burden for the last few years. Not the least of which, we're all well aware of the fact that that road itself is a pretty dark road coming into Charlton. There is one existing street light that's been up there now for about 10 years. It emits a very light yellowish light that comes off it and doesn't really illuminate the sign and that area very well. So I want to first just give kudos to Mr. Jim Rivera, my head custodian, who's made multiple phone calls to National Grid to get us information about what we can and can't do. So what we're looking at right now is, as you know, the sign, it's got 6 little solar lights on it right now. And every day I drive by that and I say, what are we doing to it? We're hoping that those solar panels last, and it does brighten the actual sign, but it really doesn't do a lot for the area as you drive into the school. So upon talking to the people at National Grid, we have 2 options. One, we could put in 5 poles that would go from the beginning of the driveway up to the end of the top driveway. They could hardwire it in, and we'd be looking at approximately $30,000 to do so. The other option is they would be willing to come out and put in a pole that will go right at the opening of the entrance with a brand new bright LED light for 0 cost, and approximately about $300 a year to run the light, which could be absorbed within our general budget. So tomorrow, there's good news and bad news. National Grid at this point in time, their pole department is on strike. They told us that they couldn't get back to us, couldn't move on this project at least until about 5 months. We've called them probably 15 times in the last 2 weeks. And the good news is we got a field engineer coming out tomorrow at 9:30 to meet with us to look at the site to see what we can actually get going, what we can start it up with. So I will have more information to give to the committee after I do meet with them. But as I step back and I look at the whole situation, for $300 a year to service the light, to really open up that area,
We can
it's
start
definitely,
with
we could
that.
start with that. And if that would appease the committee, at least to open up that entrance to brighten it up, it might be something we can at least talk about.
But in the future, I would like to see that driveway lit, because it is so dark coming up there.
That may very well be something that will be on the capital plan that the
Right.
Budget and Finance Subcommittee will be talking about.
Do you need a motion for that, or?
Yeah, well, to put the.
A motion to put it in
we're gonna-
motion?
Yeah,
Put in motion.
we'll need a motion.
I'll make a
to-
motion that Mr. Packard pursue the rest of this program,
And we agree
and we'll
to
pay
the,
the $300 a year for the price.
Do I have a
That's
second?
set in
That is
stone.
what they told me,
Okay.
yes.
Second.
okay, any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
It's a
Thank
bright
you,
light,
Mr.
thank
Beck.
you.
Thank you.
So we'll get one light anyway.
One small step.
As long as I stop missing the entrance, we're good.
That'll be good. Next on the agenda is opening of schools, and we have the principals' reports this evening, and we will start with Mrs. Pacheco and Mrs. Desto.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having us today. I'm going to speak on behalf of all 4 elementary schools on 2 of the bullets, okay? As you know, with a successful override, we all have the technology integration specialists. And so that is something that, to start the school year, has been great. And already I have seen my own self, the technology integration specialist for Charlton Elementary, has been sitting with me weekly and teaching me things that I never knew. And she's doing a technology tip at all of our staff meetings, and I've seen her in the classrooms already making a big difference, and teachers are excited. So that's awesome. And the other new position that all 4 schools are sharing is the adjustment counselor. And again, I've had a kindergartner with having a little bit of a difficult time getting down to class. Within an hour. She had a social story with pictures that she took for blogs and had it all ready to go home. So we're seeing great dividends of those two positions. As you noticed on your data for class sizes, my kindergarten class sizes are very large. The census had 85. And even if you took 50% of 85 and figured, okay, I'm going to get another 50% of that, another 42 and a half children, that brings me to 127. I have 144. So I don't know how else to predict that. So for the fourth year, I think in a row, my teachers have 24 and 25 students in their classes. And kindergartners who come in not knowing how to line up, anything. It is hard. But I also will say that I think I have a gifted staff, and they do it without complaint, and they'll get them there. So
I would just want to point out that there is a law regarding class size for kindergarten.
What is it?
So, and it is that simply the average of your classes cannot exceed 25, and we are close. So, question is, and this actually was raised by another superintendent on the listserv, as to whether or not DESE gives you a waiver for that. And that was her question, and that's how this came about. And reminded me of that because I had forgotten that, but that is actually 603 CMR 8.00.
And what's really hard is, I want to say 12 of them came in the last 3 weeks of August. So it's not even like I can come to school committee and say, can we please add a class? They come in at the very end. Because when I made the class lists at the end of June, they were all at 21, which is a manageable number. We start the year with 24 and 25, again. So.
Can I ask, sorry, go ahead, Kathy. I just wanted to know if you had instructional assistants in each of the
In
classes.
each class, we do,
Good.
yes.
A little bit of help.
Right.
It does.
Yeah. Through the chair, question, because if it seems to be a repetitive problem that's happening, and we're required to publicize for this, are we not marketing the kindergarten registrations in the right format to get the word out to parents? Because I would think ultimately your best interest is that you want to make sure that your kid is going into a small class size. But if we're planning a small class size and people aren't enrolling their students in a way that allow us to be informed to provide that small class size, then we've got to look at, are we doing everything that we need to do?
We let the town hall know, so they put it on the marquee when our registrations are. We send home a letter to everyone on the census. We send home a letter with all children from Charlton, like we'll send a letter over to Heritage School and say, could you send this home with those students in case there are any kindergartners, and we send out an alert. I don't know if you have other suggestions, we're happy to do them, because obviously we don't want such large class sizes.
So my suggestion would be that you maybe do reach out to the private daycares that are in a geographical area, not just Charlton, because people sometimes use daycares that are on their way to work. But I would also think that if we focused on the moms group in Charlton, which is where all the moms congregate with the young kids, we might be able to connect with, I know Stephanie and Jamie are very big in the moms group, that's where you have people. I think we have to start changing the mentality of people waiting till the last minute, and if we're knowing at 3 and 4 that they're coming down the road, it would help us. These are not all move-ins. This is, there's not 40 kids.
The end of the ones
were
move-ins.
Okay.
Maybe towards the beginning of the summer they weren't, but towards the end, many of them were the move-ins.
So maybe we need to contact the local real estate agents to have that as part of by the way, if you're moving in with children, you should let the school know, although they can't register you until you're here.
Right.
Let us know ahead of time that you're coming, because we plan class sizes. I hear we always respond to the need, and we always do a great job. But your class sizes, I think, have been a concern for many of us for the last couple of years. But at this stage of the game, we don't have funding to turn around and respond to this issue. And it's sad. It's the first year in school. I don't like to see any child regardless if there's an instructional assistant in the room, it's still a very critical year to get people started correctly.
Agreed. I know that last year when we brought it up, Mrs. Reed, I believe, was on the budget subcommittee at the time, and thought that that would be a good thing for the budget subcommittee to maybe think about a way to have something in place for when things like that
Contingency, yeah.
happen.
So
Right.
oftentimes, I know in some other districts, and we did it in my district, we purposely made one class small. Because you know that happens. The reality is whether it's coming out of the preschool that they just, private preschool or whatever, or daycare, and they just didn't bother. So we would always create a class of around 12 to 15, knowing that we were going to get the individuals who never bothered to register, who somehow appeared, and then move-ins. And it always filled. There wasn't a year when we didn't end up with a number that was the same. So you start out that way, and the teacher is happy that she has 15 or 12, and everyone else has 21, but it filled. It filled. So, yeah.
Can I follow up on your comment, if you don't mind?
Go ahead.
I think that going through it recently, I've been bombarded, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I've gotten that information in any way possible. And I think it is move-ins, and I think it's people that are seeking our district because we have a great district. And they're coming in because they need to get here before school starts for their kindergartner. And that's what happens. When are you gonna move? You're gonna either move before school starts for your children, or rarely during their school career. So I think it is something that's when they're coming. I don't know how we get to them any quicker because
Real
they
estate
haven't made their
agent.
decisions. Well, I think that sometimes those are decisions that happen because school is happening. So I think that I like your idea, Dr. Nash, about preparing for it, even if we
And
don't know
have
what's
the
gonna
smaller
happen.
class. I think that's a good idea. And then-
But I'm sorry if I have a question for this. Is there a space in the school that you could have another classroom?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you look at the sheet that we have right now, based on the classes that you have, if you were to take 3 students out of each classroom, you're coming down to pretty much every class is 21, even out the other 2. You have 21 in 6 classes. And then you would have you would add a 7th class, and it would be 18, and that would be the place for you to move in your extra children that come in. So I have to make the request, when budgets are presented this year, you have to plan this in. We have to stop doing what we're doing because it's not correct. We're not planning for these things, and if this historically has repeated itself 4 years and we're not responding to it, then we're making the mistake. So it needs to be, you need to plan for 7 classrooms next year.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from, and I don't know if everybody else agrees, but I'd rather cut it if we have to, but we have to come to the table with this class size already reduced and ready for that. That's my opinion.
I don't think you really say 7 because the number's really low next year. You shouldn't
Well,
specify how many. You should divide it out so that there's like 5 of 20 or 4 of 21 of 10 or something, like that. You know what we're
Well, I
talking
mean,
about.
it's so hard because, like I
Yeah.
said, there were
Yeah.
85
Right.
children on
Yeah.
the census.
Yeah,
I added another 50% of that.
yeah.
It's hard, it is just a
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
number to
It's a
predict.
guess.
I could do it, we could add a 7th class if that were the numbers, and if we don't get those children, we may have classes of 15. The committee would just have to tell me what they're comfortable with, and I mean,
And I'm-
my teachers would love that.
Right,
So-
I'm thinking that's not a bad
No,
thing.
No,
it's
Right,
not
it's
bad at all.
not a bad thing for the
No.
teachers who teach that grade. Yeah.
And that's what, given from year to year can happen when you create that small class, that early on you have to redistribute. The pushback comes oftentimes, parents are very comfortable. If you don't do it soon enough,
Right.
parents are comfortable that they have teacher X, and all of a sudden you're taking 2 or 3 to fill in that other class to make everybody's proportionately smaller. So, you really have to watch that. She said it's a moving target. It is. I think reaching out, though, as was suggested, to having conversations with some of your private daycares, even your larger ones, is a good idea. Because I think sometimes they can tell you, oh, sure, we've got some, and they weren't on your radar screen, and that's it. So.
And just some other things, we had a fire drill today, first one, under 2 minutes, 1 minute and 44 seconds. Every child got out of the building. And with the heat, yes, Charlton Elementary was a hot place to go to
Yeah.
school. But again, you know, I cannot say enough, express enough, the admiration I have for the adults in the building who just carry on and they do not complain, and because of their professionalism, it rubs off to the students. So, great start.
Can I speak to that too? I'm not knocking any of the teachers, that was wonderful, but we should not be in a scenario where we have that heat in that school, and this isn't being directed at you, this is in general. I care more about that as a parent, and I have heard so many more, I'll call them comments, about that than I have about the class sizes. I've had no one say to me, there's 25 kids in my class, but I have had 30 people come up to me and talk about, when you go to the next school committee meeting, you need to figure out a solution for Charlton Elementary School. This shouldn't be every year a conversation that has to occur at the beginning or the end of the year. And I know I'm new to this committee and I can't talk to all that has been discussed about it before, but it is a very heavy topic.
And it's for every school that does not have the air conditioning.
Sure, but Charlton Elementary, first grade wing in
Yeah.
particular, gets that
Yeah.
sun, and that was seen when you guys did all the testing during the first couple days of school. It was the hottest.
I
area.
actually went and got, I went into the teacher's workroom and I grabbed all the tablecloths that I could find from like past holidays, and I brought them up to the hill behind the school in the shade and put the tablecloths down, and it was cooler there than in the classrooms, and teachers brought their students out and did their lessons out there, and it was cooler. And there was a nice breeze, and they sat there and they did their math, and they you know, had recess out there, and it was cooler out there. So it is hot. It was hot.
Luckily, it's not going to last.
Right.
I feel like that's a bigger conversation. We shouldn't just let it go by.
No, it's a
No.
conversation certainly around capital planning, because looking at all of the buildings that are non-air conditioned and whether or not they have the capacity. I mean, it's not as simple as saying we can put air conditioning
Right.
units. We have to look at the electrical capacity, whether it would even support it, as far as that goes. So it's a bigger conversation, and certainly one that if this committee, you know, so directs us to do that, we certainly can add that to that list of things that we're looking at.
Thanks to Kathy and I that we do have air conditioning in the middle schools, because when those schools were built,
Yeah.
the majority were against putting air conditioning in. And we fought for it. And we fought for it. So that's how we got the air conditioning.
That was a hot topic, it's
Yeah.
always the one.
Just through the chair, can we add that to the capital planning, because I don't believe it's on anyone's list right now. Yep, we can.
And Jen?
Well, as my new role took place over the opening of school, it has been nothing but exciting. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. We had some great orientations the week before school started with our preschool, our kindergarten, and our first grade. Our first graders, anybody that was coming in was able to meet with their teacher ahead of the opening of school, which ended up being a great thing for them to alleviate some of that stress and the anxiety. The Dudley PTO sponsored the DW Countdown to Kindergarten, which was an adorably great show. It was hot in there, but the children persevered. They loved it, and it was very much appreciated. We don't really have as many move-ins or increases in student class sizes. Our kindergarten went down a little, our first grade went up a little, but nothing that's extremely concerning at this time. The one thing that kind of has my red flag up is just looking at the parent pickup and drop-off scenario, and we're trying to kind of revamp that process, but that's something that, just for safety of the kids, parents, parking and whatnot, we're hoping that by Monday we have a trial and error kind of plan in place, and hopefully it will be more successful, so.
Thank
Great.
you. Any questions for Jen? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll have Kathleen and Diane.
With my big print, so I don't have to wear my glasses. Sorry. So much easier. You gonna start? Oh, I'm starting, okay. So this year for our numbers in Dudley Elementary School, the one thing that I always look at is kind of over a 4-year range. And our numbers have been pretty stable, ranging between 361 and 396 students being our highest. One thing that I would note, we're at 372 students. Our average over the whole school is 21.7, which is great. We have one bubble class that's higher. We also have one bubble class that's a lot lower than what we're used to. So we have 5 sections of grade 2, 6 of grade 3, and 6 of grade 4. One thing that I note each year is that we actually, if you look at the difference between withdrawals and the incoming students, we always have a gain of 17 to 29 students over the year. So that's even taken away the withdrawal. So we do have more of an influx of students throughout the year at Dudley Elementary School. As far as our highlights this year, we are loving having our technology integration specialist full-time. She's already starting a Girls Who Code program. We're also going to do a robotics enrichment program after school. We've got our Heroes program that we'll be doing. She's doing a smartboard training for all of our staff after school. We've had a great new student orientation with a scavenger hunt for grade 2, and grade 3 and 4 were later on that day, so we were a very busy building that on the 27th. We had our first fire drill, and I'm proud to say that we safely exited the school in 58 seconds. So it was amazing. Sorry. United Way is coming to our school on Friday for their day of caring. Our safety trainings will be had with all of our students on Tuesday. Myself and Mrs. McNamara hold those trainings with all the students. And we're engaging in a PTO readathon, and I have to say the top prize for top earning for their minutes, they will get to be assistant principal for the day. And I have to say that Colin Starcheski has already told us that he plans to win that. So.
And I just want to report out on, first I will echo the sentiments of my colleagues that with the override, the addition of the elementary adjustment counselor and the technology integration specialist has already made a great improvement in, with the adjustment counselor meeting the needs, the social emotional needs of more students, and just having the ability to have our technology person on staff every day to do enrichment, support our teachers, and troubleshoot when we need somebody as well. So at Heritage School, we are down about 25 students this year, and that is because we had that bubble. So we are now at 7, 7, and 7 at each grade level. Last year we had 8 fourth grade classes, and Mr. Packard was kind enough to let us borrow Mrs. Lyons. She went back to Charlton Middle School, so we are at 7, 7, 7, which has allowed us to keep our fourth grade teams, but we've just adjusted. So one of our fourth grade teams has 3 teachers on that team. We had I sheepishly say, we had a lovely cool start at Heritage School with air conditioning, and seamless. So it was one of the, knock on wood, one of the most, the teachers were saying the second or third day, we didn't even have any criers, so it was almost a seamless start to school at Heritage School this year, and it was a wonderful, wonderful start.
Any questions? Thank you. And Chris and Dean, Charlton Middle School and Dudley Middle School.
Flip the coin. Shake it up. Okay, first and foremost, I can't believe this is the 19th year that we opened the doors to Charlton Middle School. You think about that and servicing kids in Charlton. It's absolutely amazing. This year, I couldn't be more excited to tell you that we've opened up the school year with 90 employees. We have, as of today, 686 kids on our roster. We went down, we lost 5 or 6 in the last few days. They transferred out. So we're down 3 overall. but we have an average class size of 21.4, which is a really good place for us to be at this point in time. We opened up our doors this year with 12 new staff members, 3 core teachers, 3 long-term, 2 short-term subs, 1 long-term sub, and we had 6 instructional aides. The highlights of the school year so far, and again, I can't speak highly enough of my staff who came back to work, rolled up their sleeves, met the kids at the door, started building relationships from day one. That's exactly what it takes at the middle school to be successful. I'm very, very proud of all of them. But I also can tell you this, in my 15 years at the school, the 5th grade students transitioned within 2 days. This has never happened before. It's normally taken a week that we let them out of school early to get to the buses. But by the second day, this was old hat to them. They had it down. They were walking around, shoulders back, head up, just having a great time and really acclimated to our building very quickly. And also, I have to thank the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students who came back and they just acted like little ambassadors. It's been an amazing first few weeks of school. Things that we're looking forward to, obviously, our staff. They've come out of the gate taking risks in the classroom, changing the way that they're teaching, really focusing on active engagement for the learning process, really taking it up a notch. We're going to start our overall commitment to civility and social responsibility for the kids. It's all part of what we do every day. We have our morning message. We have children doing that message for us. We try to live it, breathe it, walk it everywhere that we go so kids understand that it's consistent for everybody. In addition to that, we will be looking to continue with our leadership outreach programs. We're going to make connections with the food pantry in Charlton. We're going to go start our intergenerational club starting next month. We're also reaching out to make a connection with the Masonic Home. So my belief is that there's leadership in every child that's in the building. We do have group student council. We do have a National Junior Honor Society, but every student deserves the right to have some leadership opportunities. So we're really going to tap into that this year. Finally, I'm very excited about our positive marketing campaign. For those of you who know us on Twitter, we tweet a lot. We're going to start a one tweet Wednesday for everybody. We're one positive thing coming out of the classroom, no matter where you are. We can't mandate it by the teachers, but we encourage them to put something out there. We have our Twitter live, we have our YouTube live, we have our e-news. We're really gonna sell everything that we do each and every day. And it just brings a real positive light to what's happening in our school. We're there the first people you see in the morning, the last people you see when you leave. It's just a great place, a lot of energy, so very excited.
So do you have enough staff?
Well, you know, we're working with that. There's some things that we're going to discuss as the year goes on about contractual language and things of that nature. But we're getting it done right now. We're getting it done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions?
Just one. I thought you said we were going to have a very subdued, simple.
I get excited. I'm sorry. You're up.
117-word limit. Thanks for allowing us to the table tonight to talk a little bit about the opening at Dudley Middle School. As a dad who transitioned an 8th grader last year to her high school, and seeing my 5th grader, previous 4th grader coming into her 5th grade year, I echo Dean's sentiments in terms of the transition and the level of dedication and commitment that the faculty and staff have to developing that whole child. You know, parents have something to do with it, but as Mr. Desto mentioned last year, you know, it's more Mrs. Starcheski for my kids. But, you know, the idea about the way that the routines are set and structured from the very beginning of the first day of school, even prior to that with our welcome back and orientation with some of our student leaders who came back to help guide the kids being the 5th graders. Right on through our lunch process and parent pickup and late bus procedures. The kids just caught on very quickly, and it was really because of those teachers and staff that they just know how to roll and know how to roll positively. We had several key new hires this year, a total of 4, one team chair, a special ed teacher, and an instructional assistant to replace folks who had moved on, retired, and one, Angela Mulla-Corona, our special ed team chair, moved off to a district level position in her new district. But with the departure of Greg Sturgis over to Tantascwa as the junior high school principal, Mike Tucker joined the administrative team as assistant principal, and he has by far been the smoothest administrative transition I've been around. He's been a great rock. He's very intuitive, and he's very meticulous about how he does his responsibilities. I look forward to the committee being able to meet with him and talk with him at some point later on in the year. In terms of our school this year, hashtag Be Better Together is kind of our thumping mantra this year, along with the DMS Rocks. Social media presence is out there. Teachers are increasing their use of their Twitter accounts, increasing the use of Instagram to hook the kids into classroom news. And Facebook has really been taking off with the parent community this year in particular. Opening enrollment is about where it should be. Class sizes range anywhere from 20.3 up to 22, which is right in the sweet spot for middle school. Up to 24 is reasonable. 20 is really good. So we're right at that sweet spot, allowing our teachers to take some real good academic risks. Some examples of the risks that are being taken this year. Miss Daniels in 5th grade just received a grant for a program called the Walking Classroom, which are podcasts that kids can listen to that she selects. And they literally walk around the school or the campus while listening to the podcast. Then they go back in, they debrief, they watch some videos that the Walking Classroom provides, and then they are able to complete online assessments on the information. And all that's directly related to the mass frameworks and the standards, so she's able to teach in kind of an innovative way. We've got a Lego wall, and we're looking to make a makerspace in our library under the leadership of Susan Breer. And one of our 8th grade teachers became certified as a middle school yoga instructor, where she's going to integrate that into our exploratory program in 8th grade. So focusing on that mindfulness, the social emotional connection to the learning, kind of figuring out to give the kids opportunity to decompress and focus on the learning environment when they may be distracted. Beyond that, grade 7 combined the entire team together for team building day and activities so they could have a little bit of friendly competition between the two 7th grade teams, but really focus on that one community being better together. So all in all, it's been a tremendous opening. Student leadership is at a really high. The kids are taking over the morning announcements for us at Dudley Middle, so my voice is no longer needed at 7:50. And it's just been a real fantastic opening.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chaplin?
No, the partner, so I was going to say come All right, so our opening, I believe, went smoothly. The couple of new things we've had, we've changed around the morning drop-off for parents in the morning. We no longer allow the parents to go over by the cafeteria area, so first couple of days reteaching some parents on how to do that. We made a whole new spot where they can pull up and so forth, so we're always out there. After about the 2nd or 3rd day, they were really getting the hang of it. We don't need to be out there that much, but we are. The reason we did that because parents were pulling into students parking that they paid for and staying, doing some texting, and kids couldn't pull in. So we advertised that all through August to new parents. So it's running very smoothly right now. We've reaped the benefits of our Shepherd Hill Garden all summer, where the past month we've just had buckets full of vegetables and so forth that we've been some of the hot peppers are really hot, but that's been a cross-department endeavor and initiative that'll continue throughout the year. Our new staff are doing very well. We lost a couple of people for retirement and people taking other jobs, so we have some young staff that are really getting mentored by some really good staff here that we're going to look forward to throughout the year. The heat was unbearable. It was about close to 100 up on the 3rd floor. We did our best at rotating people down. I did my best at delivering popsicles, and we just kind of bared through it. It was close to being. It was unbearable. I'm not saying it was close. It was unbearable. We moved some people downstairs. I have a pregnant teacher that just kind of stayed down here. In the meantime, our AC went in the only areas that we have it. We had that fixed several times throughout that period too, so when it rained, it poured. The other new things for this year are, our Project Lead the Way program is continuing to grow. We have, last year we had 2 biomedical science. This year we have 4 biomedical sciences with the addition of 2 human body systems, which has been wonderful. There's been many tweets on social media within the class doing various project-based learning. In addition to a couple new, but we're emphasizing it more, certificate programs in criminal justice and communication. We're having a nice collaborative dialogue with Nichols regarding the communications and the radio station they have there and journalism and so forth. So we're going to be developing that over this year. But people are underclassmen are really looking at that and applying to those things in addition to our STEM and global studies. So we're really looking to expand that. The other thing, we have our first honors dinner. It's always, it seems like we start and then all of a sudden it's first honors. First honors dinner is next week. We have one wonderful speaker. One of the things you heard about, Barbara and I and others are working on the marketing of all the great things that we do here. And, I'm biased. I think this school is untouchable in terms of what happens inside the building. We might not be shiny and new, but what happens inside the building, no one can even come close to what we provide. So we're trying to really reach out to alumni and see what they're doing. And it's been nice this past month where we have a speaker coming from our first honors dinner, who works at NASA. He graduated back in 2012, and it's going to be a really good, he works for the International Space Station, one of their flight control teams, and talked about how the work that he did here really kind of led him that way, and how change was created when he graduated, wanted to be a pilot, and ended up being at NASA. So that's going to be a very nice talk that he's going to give during first honors. The other one was Rachel Howard, who was she got the most influential woman in manufacturing in chemical engineering, was selected, and she talked about in her article, her mom emailed me out of the blue saying, just to let you know, and it was a wonderful article that I think I sent out. I don't know if everyone got it. I'm happy to do it. Where she talked about Shepherd Hill, her junior year, really guiding her in terms of the programming that was here, in terms of into chemical engineering and the dynamics of engineering. So we're going to highlight alumni like this and our students in the building throughout the year. So you'll hear a lot of that in terms of the marketing of what goes on in the building. So other than that, I thought it was a really good opening. Hot, but it was a really good opening. In terms of class sizes, I'll definitely get you the list. I'll email it to you tonight. And you're right, there'll be a couple English classes that are 27. We try to max it at 25. We really don't want to go over that. But there are some that, just because of the schedule, go to 26, 27. Gym, 30, 35, sometimes 36. But you see the averages here. I gave this similar format to you back in the spring in terms of when we were talking about it similar. I felt that the percentages of going over 25 was much lower than the spring when you look at it. The dip. The dip, I mean, in one of the packets that you had, I did notice that we had a lot of upperclassmen leave as of August 1st, at least 20, and many of them went to private schools, Marianapolis, St. Peter's, Nobles, Noble Greenove, and other people moved to other areas, several TECA, Worcester Academy, Tantascwa, so. I think that was a little bit of the uptick, or the downtick, but we're constantly, I know this week we probably had 4 or 5, a couple more school choice came in, a couple more move-ins came in, so I'm not going to be shocked if the number's not higher by October 1st. So that's really it. Questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Do we typically, when would we typically see students coming back in that were not successful if they moved? Sometimes students go to another school and it isn't a good fit for them.
Yep.
And they come back to us. Is there a particular time period within the fall that you find them coming back in?
I think the window usually is after the first marking period, wherever they land.
Okay.
So November-ish, we'll see people trickle back in. We've had a couple people already, the first couple weeks of school, come back from Bay Path.
Mm-hmm.
We've had some other people that have dropped out in years past, because we do try to continue to reach out to them, have also come back. So I would say the window's generally November. You'll see a little bit of an uptick.
In talking to some other people on school committees and other places, they have a marked difference with after the holidays in January, people that Do you get impacted with that at the high school?
I don't see that. I know other principals. I know in Marlboro, they plan for 50 students moving in every February, and it never fails them.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we don't have much of an issue to be concerned with.
I mean, we do. I mean, the school choice. I think we're almost at our capacity for what we approved last year in terms of ninth graders, and then there's some sprinkle of upperclassmen as well that come back, either move back, and so forth. So I think it evens out by Thanksgiving.
Are our school choice seats taken, or do we have availability at your building?
I think there's probably a handful left. I want to say, in the upper 20s right now. And I think we approved 33. So
Okay.
generally, we'll see some of those too. And the good thing about that is sometimes our existing students, for one reason or another, move during the year,
Mhm.
and we always try to keep them here if it's a surrounding community.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
What is your EL population?
Low, very low. I mean, we have an ESL class of maybe 3 to 5.
Oh, okay.
So it's very low. And again, by the time they get here,
Yeah.
they've already been through all the other schools, and they're at a much greater. I mean, I think last year we had a little bit of an uptick of move-ins that were really. We had someone from Egypt last year, Barbara, and a few others. This year, it's kind of stable.
Okay.
Yeah. Very low compared to other communities.
Any other questions? Thank you, Phil.
Okay.
Can I have a follow-up question in general? In the class size, if we look at the grid that was provided, the only school that provided information on the special needs population is Shepherd Hill, but none of the other schools have designated if they have separate classrooms. If we can get the information on that, I'd appreciate that.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the Director of Finance and Operations report, and that's Mr. Matthew.
Thank you very much. I do have a couple of donations for the school committee to consider this evening. Charlton Elementary School received a donation of $500 from Country Bank for savings for their Choose to Be Nice Club. The Shepherd Hill Regional High School received a donation of $1,778.17 from the Gridiron Club to assist in paying for the practice sled for the football team. Additionally, Shepherd Hill received a donation of 5 iMac desktop computers, model year 2013, and not included in the memo, but coming shortly right after, at Mason Road School, Catholic Charities has donated 5 backpacks, and the Hope and Caring for Those in Need, a Facebook page, has offered to donate supplies to students in needs.
Now, the 5 iMac, I mean, aren't they obsolete, 2013?
They're certainly dated at this point in time. 5 years
Yeah.
for a computer is right about its useful life,
Right.
if you will. I don't know if Mr. Chaplin would like to speak to the utilization of the iMacs going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're figuring out right now. The software is on the iMacs is superior for music.
Oh, okay.
Or some of the CAD software.
So you can put it to
yeah,
use.
we can put it to use, and if we can't, I mean, it was a charter school in New York that a parent worked at, and then she approached me and said, my husband works at this charter, they're getting rid of all these iMacs, would you use them? I'm like, yeah. So when he was up there, he gathered them and brought them here. So I'm writing a letter to them now, but I think we can utilize them in terms of the software for music or CAD or our newspaper and so forth.
Okay.
I will say the price is right
Yeah.
for those particular systems.
But sometimes it's maddening when you're on a technology that's obsolete and
It can be-
doesn't do all the things you want it to do.
It can be challenging, and we don't
Right.
have Macs anyplace else in the district, really, so.
So I will entertain a motion to approve and accept all the donations. We'll take them all at once.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of FY18 business. As the committee is very well aware, FY18 was a challenging year. As I've closed out the books, I've tried to maximize the carry-forward amounts in school choice and circuit breaker while trying to ensure the excess and deficiency balance is maintained, kind of the trinity of the financing, other sources that the school district has available to it. The bottom line in terms of transfers, you can see listed there. Mason Road salaries, there was staff moved last year, and the request didn't come to the committee in this time frame last year for both Mason Road and Charlton Middle, moving special ed teaching and support staff to Mason Road, moving support staff to Charlton Middle School. Dudley Elementary School, the salary overrun was primarily due to the long-term absence of 2 of the 3 custodians there, and the need for, obviously, substitute custodians we couldn't go without. And Dudley Middle School, as the committee is well aware, we had to replace the domestic hot water heater without it being planned, and as a result, have a small overrun there. I don't know if anybody has specific questions to any of these particular areas.
And do we have to vote on these transfers?
I would ask that you vote on this, yes.
Okay. And if there's no objection, I'll take them all together unless you have questions on any of them. Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to accept the transfers as Mr. Matthew has put forward to us. Do I? Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much. You do have an updated FY19 budget included in your packets where the summary pages, both the overall district summary as well as the individual summaries of the schools. Primarily, these were salary transfers. As we hired new staff, as staff was reassigned, et cetera, we tried to catch all of that to avoid having to go back this time next year for the large transfers, as we did from FY18. The committee is certainly well aware of the additional staff that we've had to add since kind of the budget season has closed. Everything that's known, and even the 2 positions that are requested further on in the agenda are accounted for. Our use of circuit breaker at this time seems to be about the same as we were anticipating. The big change for the FY19 financing was that we had about $80,000 or so from the FY18 SPED entitlement grant that we could carry forward to FY19. That was unused money from FY18. So that was certainly not planned and helped to offset a good deal of the expense. As you can see in the chart provided, depending on where the state ends up with its circuit breaker reimbursement, we'd still be looking at a balance of at least $560,000 going forward at the end of FY19. With a potential high of $675,000. That's of course assuming no other changes. That's of course assuming that the state doesn't come in and do oh, well, we overestimated, so we're going to have to cut this down. But given where the state closed for FY18, I don't think 9C cuts are on the table for the upcoming year. I would ask that you approve the budget summary page as listed with the transfers as detailed.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the summary page.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion?
Just a question and a favor, Mr. Matthew. Is it possible that when we have these come out, they can have a footer with an updated date on them? So that historically, when we're
point.
going
Yes.
home and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
looking at, I want to make sure that I'm keeping the right one.
Right.
The column dates kind of indicate that, but that's a good point and easy to add.
Be really easy
Mhm.
to make it. Thank you. If I could just ask you to repeat the $80,000 in sped, was a sped grant?
The sped entitlement grant, yes. There was unused money from FY18 that we're able to carry forward to FY19.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
A little bit more about streetlights. The town of Dudley has gone through an audit as they're updating their streetlights through the Green Communities funding that they've received. When their audit was complete, they've identified 4 light poles that are on our land and property that truly belong to us, that they, I'll say the word kindly, has been paying for over these past years. Yeah, you know, that's a good point. We do have an official request to transfer these over to our name and thus our billing cycle. The lights themselves are not very much money, around that $300 to $500 range for operation. I wanted to let the school committee know before I actually wrote the letter, but I will be writing the letter to request this tomorrow.
So, what buildings are they on, what property?
No, they're 4 streetlights going down to the middle school.
Oh, okay.
And I'm guessing it dates back to when the project was
Probably,
originally
yeah.
started.
So we're gonna have to pay how much? We're gonna have to
Between $300 and $500 for
For
each-
light?
For a year, yeah.
each year, yes.
Yeah.
Why isn't that considered town?
Because it's our property.
But if we had a front on the main street out here, it would still be town.
Right,
So-
but this is the driveway going up to the middle school.
I understand that, but we're still, that's still being our driveway to the front of our building. So why wouldn't it be, like, your address for Dudley Middle School is what?
I believe it's 70 Oxford Road. Dudley
Which is
Oxford
the,
Road.
which is the main road, correct?
Yep. I live
So-
on it, yep.
So why wouldn't it be?
68 is Shepherd Hill, 70 must be Dudley Middle.
Right, so why wouldn't it be town? I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but why would they not consider that town if that's the driveway coming up from the main road?
Because
It's on
that-
our property.
own it.
it's
It's like
our
owning your own
property. We own
driveway.
the rest of the poles that are there are our responsibility.
That's just like the Charlton Middle School that we're doing. They're putting in that one free because it's going to be on the town's property. Because you said the pole's free and everything, we have to pay for the light.
Mhm.
But if we put it on our property, wouldn't it be more money? We'd have to pay for
Well,
the,
we are putting it on, Charlton Middle School is our property.
right, but I thought the pole was going to be on the town property.
No, I believe we own up to the road.
Okay.
It'd be like if you put, be like if you do a streetlight in your own driveway, that's what it comes down to. You pay for it, the town doesn't.
Yeah.
Just like your own
There's
driveway.
basically 4 lights in the middle of
Right.
the lights going up and the lights going all the way down to the school that just never were accounted for properly.
So where's that gonna come out of our budget, is the question, I guess?
I would guess that they'll get charged the same place the other light poles are being charged, and I believe that's Dudley Middle School.
And how much will it be, like 300 a pole?
If it's 300 per pole, that's $1,200 per year. The,
Hey, at least we got it for 20 years. Look at the
I
bright
was
side.
gonna say, cost avoidance is pretty
If they don't charge
good.
us back, charge us.
Retroactive.
They haven't suggested that.
Don't say we don't,
so.
yeah. Don't take that letter.
The next piece of business I'd like to deal with is disposal of surplus materials. Shepherd Hill has requested the following textbooks be declared surplus. Algebra 1, 17 years old, 113. Algebra 2, 15 years old, 51. Physical science, 10 years old, 200. Another physical science series, 6 years old, 20. Living Ocean, 23 years old, 50. Mater Biology, 14 years old, 50. And Introduction to the Human Body, 17 years old, again, count of 50.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve the disposal of the surplus materials.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I just wanted a little bit more discussion about the physical science book where it's only 6 years old. Why that might be being discarded.
I'll,
Do they not use it anymore?
yeah, I don't believe they're being used at the.
Sure. We there's only 20 copies of that. We stopped teaching physical
Right.
science.
Okay.
We did ask the middle school. They didn't want them. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
That's all.
Good eye.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous, Sandy.
And lastly, attached to to my memo was the annual asbestos notification that will go out to, be posted on our website and go out to members of the community. This happens annually and will be posted at all the schools in addition to the website.
Through the chair, can I just ask a question? I assume that the schools that show that they had asbestos means it's still intact, there's nothing to, no,
Encapsulated.
yeah, there's nothing that we need to worry about.
No,
They're just specifically declaring that there is asbestos present.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Elaine?
Two things. I was anticipating that the Budget and Finance Subcommittee was going to be on the agenda because we had discussed the first meeting being held and then discussing an update, but there was a matter that came up at today's Budget and Finance meeting that is of an urgent nature. So if I can ask to discuss it right now. So as we had discussed at the last meeting, the focus of our meeting tonight was going to be regarding capital planning needs. And with the information that was presented by Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew regarding how we will need to approach this going forward, there was a discussion centered around how best we can forecast and project with some surety and accuracy what truly our needs were and what the anticipated costs were. And we had a very lengthy discussion regarding building off of the information that each principal had provided in their school budgets at the beginning of the spring, and then obviously going further in depth into needs that we need to explore, and going back to the 2016 report that we had done on Shepherd Hill. So the discussion in the Budget Subcommittee was to actually prepare for this process, which would be a new process. There's never been this type of capital planning forecasting done in the district, to look at hiring what they call a house doctor, which is a company that has a high level of expertise in all of the structural requirements of a building and the needs of the building, to come in and do a very thorough analysis and reporting on each individual business building, which would then allow us to focus on our priority at the moment, which is our critical items regarding safety and security, which is what we are looking to have information prepared for next budget season. So it's a very critical need. We don't have the expertise within our district administrative staff or facility staff to put together this type of information. So what we are bringing forward to you is your opportunity to discuss, and we'd like to move forward with allowing Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew to go through and start investigating what companies would be provided, would be available to provide this kind of information and service. We can start looking at what a scope of services would be and what the anticipated cost would be and timeline would be. If we are looking to move forward with engaging both towns for budget season and having this incorporated into town meeting, we need to move quickly. So we are feeling that this is an urgent issue that the committee should discuss, and I would ask that we consider putting a vote forward to authorize Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew to start investigating that.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to authorize Mr. Matthew and Dr. Nash to do further research.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, any more discussion on it? Go ahead.
Do we have any ballpark for how much this type of thing would cost?
Well, We don't. We don't. Be-
And is it an engineering firm that would be? Is it a bid process and that they would bid to be the engineering firm to look through this for us?
Typically, it could be. There are two avenues that we have potential to look at. One would be to do an RFP, request for proposal. Typically, they're middle-sized architectural firms that will have electrical engineers, HVAC, with structural engineers, so that when you look at you're looking at the horizontal and the vertical, and coming up with it. We talk with the subcommittee, particularly around leveling, so that we provide the towns with really a 10-year capital plan that would include, at the first level, first category, as Elaine indicated, are critical needs / safety. And then looking at those needs that would be more intermediate, that would range anywhere up to life expectancy up to 5 years, long range, and then we separate it out, and strategically so, security, because I think that's a whole separate avenue. Potentially, this company would not be able to do that, but we need to look at that, and however we approach that, it needs to be part of a capital plan. That's what we're looking at. So we're looking to get really initially to get started recognizing the end timeline that we have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
Okay. Next agenda item is a review of 2018-2019 staffing changes. Dr. Nash?
Yes, you have in your packet this evening a review of all of the staffing changes that have occurred between the end of last year and this year. Also broken out, listed for you are leaves of absences and individuals who have filled those positions and new positions. At the next meeting, the Director of Finance will provide you with really the information that will show you the cost, either savings, but as you start to look through this list, you have at least initial information that provides you with the salary of the person who was in the position and the salary of the individual who we hired for the position. But I'd also like, if I might this evening, to take an opportunity to introduce a new staff member to a central office, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Matthau, since he and some of you were involved, I believe, in some of our administrators in the process of the hiring of the food service director. So, Mr. Matthau?
Thank you very much. As the committee is aware, we did have a vacancy in the food service area, and we were fortunate to be able to bring forward, and I'd ask Mr. Greenberg to come to the table if it's all right with the committee. Matthew Greenberg has a Bachelor's of Science in Sports Management from York College of Pennsylvania. He previously worked at Sodexo at UMass Medical School in Shrewsbury, where he was an award-winning manager for 13 years. Mr. Greenberg is experienced in food safety and production. He is certified in ServSafe and mass allergen awareness, as well as CPR and first aid. When not in the kitchen, he serves as an assistant coach for the men's lacrosse team at Shrewsbury High School, soon to be Shepherd Hill High School, perhaps. Mr. Greenberg was very impressive in his interviews and was a unanimous choice, I think. Clearly a good fit for what the district needs, both in terms of knowledge base and personality. So, Matt, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Greenberg.
Thank you.
And he started on Monday. We've also, certainly making the transition kind of from field related to education related food services, we've also have established a kind of a mentor for him to work with, someone who is currently a sitting food service director who also is the former president of the association. So via email, telephone, today, text, whatever, he's been able to connect with her as well as some others that we know. So that's helpful, and I know that he appreciated that when we were talking, and I met with him initially, so welcome.
Thank you, I do appreciate it.
And is Mason Road a free lunch program?
No.
No, it didn't make it.
It did not qualify when the state actually reviewed all. What they do is they provide a preliminary number, and that's an estimate, or I think in this case it was more of a guesstimate on their
And you
part.
thought it was going to be, right?
Well, the initial numbers indicated that we could be, but when the state did its final review, we were under.
A little under?
A little more than they were anticipating under.
Matthew, I don't know if you wanted to say anything. I know that you've only been here for a few days, for 3 days.
What do you think? What do you think?
I will say that just being around for a couple days and going out to a couple schools and meeting the principals and our staff, there's a very large sense of community and family that some people spend a lifetime looking for, and it's really a dream to just walk into some place and feel like I've been here for years. I mean, a lot of the staff has been here longer than I've been alive, and
Where's Dolores?
He met Dolores.
I'm not naming names. I'm housebroken. But no, it's just a great feeling to be here, and everyone that I've spoken to and met over the course of the last 3 days has just been welcoming, and I feel right at home.
I think you'll be the right fit for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question on this chart that's presented to us. Under the leaves of absences, I had 2 questions, first of all. First of all, Christine was listed as a bachelor's when she was replaced, but in the next line, she's listed as a master's. There's a mistake there. I don't know which one she would be. Do you see what I'm saying? It's under the leave of absence. Kristen, I guess it is.
Kristen Aganis.
Aganis, right.
Yeah.
She's listed as a step 9 bachelor's, but when she's, in the next column, she's listed as a step 15 master's, so one of those must be incorrect. So just when you're figuring out your figures, you
Yep.
should correct it. Okay. And my other thing, it's just, it doesn't really matter, but when we discussed her transfer, we decided that was not a leave of absence, that's a transfer, because she transferred to the high school. It's not a leave of absence, because if that were a leave of absence, she would have to be considered an extended employment substitute. So those 3 people down there, I think those are all transfers. Gretchen and Bogalski, I think
Right.
they're not
Right.
leaves of absence, they were transferred. So just
Right.
to have the bookkeeping correct, it
Right.
should be labeled differently.
They were part of the
Transfer.
domino.
Right, exactly, but they're
Okay.
still not,
Yep.
they're not leaves of
The
absence.
listing of it, right.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yep.
That was, if I
Go
could
ahead,
ask a
Lynn.
question, that was my question on the leave of absence, is typically leaves of absence come before us and are approved, and there are people that are on this list that I don't recall coming.
Because Mr. Dessler did bring her for the leave of absence, and I questioned it, saying if she were a leave of absence, she'd have to be hired as an extended employment, which is crazy, since she's a 10-year vet, well, how many years she's been here. So those are just transfers, so when the superintendent has the right to transfer anybody, he doesn't have to come to us. He can transfer anybody.
And
No, it's the bottom 2 people that I don't recall coming.
The last
before.
2, she's on,
Those I
The last 2?
don't, those I don't recall.
I thought you were talking about the first 3.
No,
Okay.
so that was my question, I didn't recall those 2.
Is it full year leaves of absence that come before the school committee?
I think what happened on the one, Elizabeth, that was only going to be a partial leave of absence for 8 to 10 weeks, and now she's out for the year. We just
It
found
could
out.
be, I
Yeah,
know
that
that was
did happen.
something that was short-term.
It happened over the summer. Mr. Chaplin told us that. She was originally going to be out for a couple of months, but now it's a full year, so that's probably why we didn't have to approve that.
Right.
And the other was maternity leave, I believe.
Yes, yes, it is maternity.
Any other questions? Anything else?
No.
Dr. Nitsch
No.
on that? Okay.
Will that be sent out before the next school committee meeting, just as a, once this is updated, or will it be at the next?
The salary?
The budget impact,
Yeah.
that'll be part of the next package.
Okay, thank you.
Just for my own sake, what figure do you use when you do that? The one they would get in June or the one they would get when they started the year? You know, like they get that halfway through the year, they get a raise?
I use the annual salary
To the
that we're gonna
final-
pay out.
Okay.
So the total that's paid out for
Okay.
for
So
all
it matches
183
both.
days.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, that brings us up to consideration of requests for additional staffing, Dr. Nash.
Yes. You have in your packet this evening a request from Lorinda Allen, the Director of Special Education, for 2 new positions. These are SPED instructional assistant positions, 1.0 FTE at Charlton Middle School, requested because of a student move-in after the beginning of the year with an IEP that requires a one-on-one. The student had transferred on the first day of school from a residential placement. So as one would see, the middle school and Mr. Packett and his staff have really reached out to ensure that this is a smooth, seamless transition for this student. The second one is also due to a student who has moved in. Again, this is at Charlton Elementary School, special ed position for a 1.0 instructional assistant. This position, again, for a kindergarten student who just entered yesterday. This student transferred from another district IEP that had a one-on-one. So both of these, as you heard, are accounted for in the figure that was given to you in the budget when Mr. Matthau was talking about that. So they have been accounted for already in that number when you look at your sheet. So I would ask that you would approve these.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Question.
Elaine?
Just clarification, when we're saying students transferred in from another district, are they transferring in because they've moved into the district?
They moved into the district,
Okay.
yes, they have. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jamie?
I'm new to this again. I'll probably say that for a year.
Mr. Matthews said it for
I'm
5,
still
so
saying
what
it.
does
Perfect. So what's the likelihood that we're going to have more of these, not move-in, I mean, I get we don't know that, but that are in the district currently that are now going to need a one-on-one? I mean, how often does that happen? How often are we going to have to come back every meeting and continue to approve these until we have no more way to do that financially?
Well, go ahead, right ahead.
I'll
but
answer
I'll
that
jump
question
in.
for you as from the special education world. It could happen daily because the decisions on staffing are based in an IEP meeting.
Okay.
And the IEP team turns around and decides and designs an IEP, and the goals and objectives drive service delivery. And that's what changes staffing needs for a student. It changes placement. So I guess my question, and I would tag on to you with this question, is we've had a lot of adjustments recently, and Mr. Matthew might agree with me, special education is your most volatile aspect of your budget. And it's not anything that stays stagnant. Our budgets stay stagnant, but those costs don't. So I guess, is there a way that we could be looking for more updated reporting during the year instead of the one, we do it at budget season and they would look to project, but just my experience is it's better to project for an increase
So
and not a decrease.
We have meetings,
Right.
I set up meetings on a regular basis with both, and they follow actually. My meeting starts with the Director of Finance every 2 weeks, and then it's followed by the SPED Director, because typically those issues are related. So Lorinda and I and Rich have met a number of times recently because of some of these things we're looking at. And also in her evaluation, as she came in, looking at staffing and looking at us not being able to meet some needs that we needed to. It is, as Mrs. Rabbit indicated, the most volatile area in your budget. And it is a moving target, and there is no way for us to totally project what that will look like in 5 months and 2 months, which is one of the reasons why you try to retain circuit breaker and not use it, so that you have that. That is one of the reasons that the state provided some, quote, extraordinary relief. And you try not to use that. And you've heard Mr. Matthau talk about the money that's there at this point, so it could address those kinds of situations. Sometimes mid-year you start to see changes because things are not working out programmatically with students, and you make those decisions in the best interest of students.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries, it's unanimous. Review of MASC District Office Restructuring Report, and you did get in your packet the summary when we all met with Mr. Kuchar. And Dr. Nash, do you want to speak to that?
This was a request that the committee, I think prior to my coming on board, at the end of the school year, had engaged Glenn Kuchar, who was the executive director of your organization, to begin to look at your organizational structure. The committee members had asked that we bring this forward, so we are doing that at this time for further discussion or for any action or any direction or directive that the committee may wish either I or other members to take.
And I recall that we did get a flow chart, which I could not find that currently. Thank you, Elaine, maybe we can all get a copy of that. That's our current structure from the top down. So who wants to start the discussion?
I think that the report is a good beginning to identify what is important to everybody that was interviewed. And I think he had a good representation of interviewees to put this report together. But I think that it's so high level that we really need to dig a little bit, well, a lot deeper to really identify what we want our organization to look like, what our needs are, what types of positions we should have in our district based on where we are today and where we want to be in the future. And I think it would be a great opportunity now that we have Dr. Nash in place to solicit her assistance and her expertise to take a look at this further and enlist the help of others in the district to really take a more global look at the organization and how we want it to look.
And I think that's a good idea. That's a good start.
I think that, although I agree with you for the staffing and how we're gonna lead, from the top down, I think that the cultivation of leadership program is something we don't really need to wait on. I won't speak for you, but I think that's a very solid approach that we should not wait on if there's staff members of any kind in our district that have the opportunity to go to leadership meetings.
You have 3 members currently who are involved in the Aspiring Leaders Program, which is really a program that MASS runs for those who are either aspiring to move to central office positions. So we have 3 individuals. I believe it's 3, correct, Barbara? Yes. Barbara is one of them. That's why I looked her way. So I think that is a start. That is a formal program that, quite frankly, came as a result of many of us who are longtime superintendents ready to retire saying, how do we cultivate the legacy of people both within, but also from a systematic level and the state level, what organization should be doing it if not MASS, the Superintendents Association. So they did put this program together. It's a multi-year program, if I remember correctly.
It is a 2-year program.
So you have that, in place, and I think that's a formal program, which is probably the best type.
Yeah, Barbara, you said it's a 2-year program?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I just think that that's something that we should definitely take into consideration. Certainly if there's people that are looking to come into the central office, but it could be a teacher that's looking to move up in the school. I think that, God bless you, that may be a low-cost way for us to show our staff how supportive we want to be of keeping them.
The chair, when I'm going to add a little bit of information from back in the springtime. So one of the reasons why I know that I was very supportive of us looking at this issue was not for what we have, but for what we're missing. And we have a very small central office staff for a district of this size. And we do not have the typical how do I say that? We don't have a pathway or a training ground. And one of the things, and I know Dr. Nash recognized it being here, is that we have a culture of working from within, and the jump from one position to another creates a huge change in job responsibilities and what that is. What we discussed in the spring was looking at the central office in a way of potentially looking to reconfigure the office so that we were creating that pathway that Mrs. Terry is referring to. So we're creating within our own organization our growth for our internal administration to move through. What we have recognized is the great responsibility and the great burdens that come with the position of superintendent. And I think statistically, people that sit in the superintendent role are sitting in that role for 3 to 5 years and they're moving on. We've been very blessed in our 44 years of history that I think Dr. Nash represents the 7th person that sat in the superintendent seat, which is just historically, not known. So I know that when we started looking at this, my hope was that we were going to get some guidance from Mr. Kuchar about how we could look at the operation of the central office and potentially, some reconfiguring. I think he gave us, a great overview. I don't think he tapped into everything that we're not doing and we're not missing. I know Mrs. Reed and others have spoken over the years of the fact that we don't really have an official grant writing component in our administrative staff, and that is something where, especially districts like ours that are strapped, that's a huge area to try and obtain other revenue. There are other venues. MASC is obviously one that we had come in. It was a member service. It was no cost. Mars as a consulting group does do consultation work where we can work with retired people that have filled these roles to give us some guidance. I think that we need to come up with a plan to approach this as far as leading everything away. If you look at the org chart that was there, everything filtered on this. I think there were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There were 9 direct reports to the superintendent role, and that really has to change. And to Mrs. Antosi's point, I don't know that we've been given the guidance. I think we have a great asset in Dr. Nash being able to come in and give us experience from being in multiple venues. I don't know if there is other support that she's going to need to do this kind of work to give us guidance, but one of the reasons why we looked at having interim positions in 2 administrative spots was to be able to look at this and make some decisions this year so that we could then go forward before posting for permanent positions if we're looking to do some kind of change to a job title and a job description. So I don't know what the next steps are. I don't know if this is something completely that we could expect Dr. Nash to do without looking for some kind of consultative services to her to help get this done.
So, do you have any suggestions, or you're going to get it started?
I don't. I'm actually looking for direction for the committee as to the comprehensiveness of what you want, because that would tell me the scope of whether I need to speak with some other people. If you're thinking more central office as opposed to more globally looking at facilities and operation as a component of your entire district oversight, as well as teaching and learning, as well as student services, as well as central office, then that's that's your entire organizational plan. And to that degree, I think I would want to work with, some others that I know, or to reach out, because I think it will take time to look at that and to bring back probably a number of models. And I think the timing of this also, because I am running a school district,
Right.
so the timing of this is critical, as to when would the committee want this to be brought back, and whether or not it's a small, just focus on central office and nothing more. But when you get into teaching and learning, it trickles down to everything. It trickles down to positions of leadership at building level, all the way down to stipend positions, and to look at the total, organizational structure. Those who have quasi-leadership roles as well as defined leadership roles by the titles they have. So I really would look for the committee for guidance on that.
And I think, Mary, you were one of the proponents, so maybe you can.
I think there's a danger in looking at our organization piecemeal, because if we make small changes here and there, we may then look at something else and say, oh, we should have done it this way, and then it's a little bit too late to do that. So I would be more in favor of looking at it a little bit more globally. Perhaps Dr. Nash could tell us what type of assistance she would need in order to do that, and come back with some recommendations on a few models for organizational structures that goes a little bit beyond just the central office, because it does trickle down to everyone in the organization. And no one person can do it. That was one of our issues to begin with. The superintendent's job was so big that it's really difficult to retain superintendents, and we want Dr. Nash to be able to do her job, so if she needs assistance, I think we should provide her with that support.
So.
So I'll just share when because I participate with Mars at the statewide level. I had reached out to Mars to what their options were. So when we were looking at this at the spring, I did mention MASC, and I did look at Mars. Mars does a very extensive. They do very extensive work. They bring experts in all levels to sit down and look at it. So they have an ability to provide you that kind of a blueprint based on what you're looking to do. So I think that the difference, quite honestly, was MASC was free, and Mars is going to, they bill out at $90 an hour, I believe, or something like that. I'm not too sure, but depending on how extensive you want them to go, obviously it's going to come down to a cost to do that. It's a question of how thoroughly you want to look at this, and if you want to look to provide those kinds of opportunities down to the very, beginning levels of entry into the district, and provide places. I know I constantly see, teachers here that are mentoring to become an administrator, and we have obviously upper people that are looking to go up into even upper levels. It would be great if we provided that pathway, like we're putting pathways at the high school for our students. It would be great if we had pathways within the district for those people that want to grow in their careers in education. I think we can all agree, and Dr. Nash can attest to it, that there is a great void in superintendent candidates across the state. It's impossible for us to, if we have 5 people that want to be a superintendent, not all 5 of them are going to be a superintendent in this district. And as much as you don't want to lose people, I would certainly like to help people that want to grow be in a position to do that, if that's what their desire is. But
Okay, for a start, maybe you can do some research and then come back to us to tell us what type of help that you would need.
The only direction that I probably would need for clarification as to that would be if the committee wants me to do the global, for lack of a better word, or the micro? In other words, focus just on central office particularly, or would you like me to look at facilities and operations, student services, teaching and learning? In other words, if you're going to look at it, central office, including, HR and all of that, it's going to be more
That
extensive.
sounds like a big
I
undertaking.
would stop the central
Yeah.
office myself,
I would just.
because you
what
can't do all that in a year,
No.
and do it well.
I couldn't do it, and that's why I said
Yeah,
I would need to
yeah,
bring in
right,
someone.
and how many experts we
Your
bring in.
opportunity is, micro, looking at just particularly a position or multiple positions within central office, or, larger than that, and looking at, really, while you're doing it, looking at your entire organization and kind of mapping out a strategic plan, if you will. While positions may be recommended, they may not be available because of budget at that time. So that would determine probably, my need to go out and have some conversations or bring in some people. So that's what I.
There's probably, you've mentioned several times now, some key components like student services and human resources. We probably don't have to go all the way down to the entry-level employee coming into
Right.
the district. I'm thinking more the key job functions, or the key functions that we would need in order to support students, in order to support personnel, in order to support central office. So if we take it a little bit bigger than just central office, but not as micro
I think one of
as-
our major problems is we don't have a chain of command. I think that's a
Yes,
big thing we need to
absolutely.
get done, because if something happens to you, you're out, we really don't know who's next. And I think that was one of our main goals for starting this. I think that's what we should,
Yeah.
it's at least a chain of command.
Part of the process is also looking at what people currently do in the positions they hold. What should they be doing in those positions? Should there be additional duties, and
Right.
balancing that? And then looking at how do organizations similarly in size, regional schools are unique, as you know, because of their structure and their benefits and the fact that they oversee all of that. Similar to us, how are they organized? And there are potential ways that you can look at that. So I certainly can, what I can do is to potentially come back at the next meeting and to suggest to you maybe an approach. In other words, let me focus on these areas. I think isolating the central office, it may or may not be something as easy to do, because it really takes out another key piece of the organization that we need to look at. I just haven't had an opportunity to really sit and give it a lot of thought, other than looking at the current structure and asking almost on a daily basis, now who handles that, and who
Right,
handles this,
exactly.
and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I think,
And I think, as Mary did say too, the human resource should be a component in this.
in
In the
some
central-
organizations, for example, there are in regional schools and larger school districts, there is an assistant superintendent of human resources, and that person oversees. So there are all kinds of
Okay,
models. There's an assistant superintendent for student services. There's assistant superintendents for teaching and learning. So those are just those pieces of central office. We haven't even looked at facilities and operations and the role that Director of Finance and Operations typically does, and who would therefore be involved in what we're discussing as capital planning. Who would be the person who would oversee that once projects get going? So that's a key component. And then, filtering down to the most important component in my eyes is teaching and learning. Do you have in place all of those individuals who have a stake in teaching and learning? Do we have it? You heard the principals talk about what that school adjustment counselor has done to their building. So how has that changed the role? And we've had that discussion of the school psychologist. So there's lots of discussions that need to happen. That's why it's hard to just make that focus narrow. And that's why I really can't answer you as to, who else I would need, and my comfort level, quite frankly, at trying to be able to do that in some kind of a timely manner if you're asking me to do it by 2 months or something. So.
If I can just highlight to the concern Mrs. Kabala raised, one of the issues that we really have right now that's kind of critical is outlining the chain of command. And I know that back in the spring when we discussed this, Mrs. Antossi asked for job descriptions for each of the roles that are here. So if we can kind of look first and foremost at job descriptions for the positions that we do have, and know what our emergency plan is for chain of command in the event that someone isn't able to do their role. I know there's been some issues or questions, I'm not saying issues, questions raised previously and that people within central office are cross-trained. So I think those are really kind of three critical points that we can start off with and maybe have a quicker response to those, but then looking, it's always good to be thorough, but one thing that I've learned is that we have to do things in phases because of economics. So we might have to not be able to get everything that we want with this, but be able to start at the most critical place, which is central office.
Typically, the school committee would have approved all job descriptions. So if there are ones that exist, if you haven't approved them, they would be simply existing descriptions that we would need to bring to you. I'm not sure, I'd have to go back to talk with Sandy to know, get the history of, as the position was created, was that a position that was brought before the school committee with a job description clearly, and that is the existing job description, and I know I had asked that when I came on board, looking at that, so we'll have to go back and investigate that and see what we've got. And where we don't have it, we may have to start actually from that square by talking to the individual, which I've done kind of in an intermediate way in an entry plan, but not with any level of detail. To what is it you currently do? You know, what, and I have asked, is there a job description? And I'm not sure that they all exist for all of the central office positions. They certainly exist in the individual contracts that principals have, because I've seen them, they're involved, but I'm not sure that, Mrs. Rabbit, that, you know, they exist in for all, so we'll have to go back and start exploring that. Okay.
I guess I'm leaning more towards what Mary said, in that this is something that we have the opportunity to look at now. We said we were going to commit to do that when I started on this committee. I feel like we would be shortchanging ourselves and our staff if we didn't take a very comprehensive look and we only did a central office evaluation. I appreciate that it might not be everything that we can accomplish even in 10 years, but if we have at least a very strong outline of where we're at, we can, I'll call it, pick from the apple tree the low-hanging fruit that we can address right away, maybe some of it in a manner that's not going to be costly to us, but we're making a capital improvement plan for budget. Why would we not do that for this too? Let's make the big plan and then chip away on it as we can. Although that said, I also agree with what Mrs. Kabala said, that we have a strong need of needing to know the second person that could make a decision right now. And that, I don't think they have to be done one or the other. I think we can realize and recognize that that's an emergent need, and the rest is something that we should also not give up this opportunity for.
I can assure you we've identified those individuals already.
Great.
While even going as far as sending out to my elementary principals to say, when you're out of the building, who is your second command? And they've all responded with, who do I go to? So we do know that there is, while it's unofficial and it may not be in their job description, typically, it's a central office person. It's oftentimes where you do not have a superintendent, it is the director of finance and operations, or business manager, and where you do not have that person in some districts, which are not many, it can be your SPED director or student services director if you don't have that. So we already have that in place.
But do we have to vote it? I mean, do we have to put this formally in place?
That's an informal, given that. I think a couple of things I would say to that is that not knowing what you have and what you've approved for job descriptions, certainly moving forward with any kind of proposal, albeit small or large, you would want a clear-cut job description that you would approve for that position, so you know. And in that, clearly, who answers to who, going back to that flow chart, you know, and the fact that you've got so many people answering. It was kind of my question, who does this person answer to? Who evaluates this person? We're doing that. It's easy to have that discussion at a building level, but at a large organizational level, sometimes it's somewhat gray as to, and it's never been decided. So as much as we hate, as superintendents, coming up with job descriptions and getting them approved by school committee, I can tell you, I always would live and die by those because that clearly delineates, at least for that period of time, what that person does and where there are some gaps. And I would assume, like most organizations, there will be some gaps. You've already identified those, I think, so, really, so.
And that's what Kathy and I have been trying to do, the job description for the wage and benefits committee that we're on. And we've done a few with Rich, and we should have all the job descriptions for everyone. So we
So
can't
how would you
really,
like me to proceed, I guess, is
because you
my
can't
question.
do everything at once.
Well, start slow.
You
right?
have
Yeah.
to start slow. Jamie has a good point, but you can't just do everything at
It'll take
once.
too much of your time.
That's too much. I think what we said, what do you think,
I would
Mary?
propose that we ask Dr. Nash to come back with some thoughts on a overall view of an organizational structure, even if, well, you know, even if the details are not all spelled out, because
Spelled out.
that's going to take some time, and
Time,
she's going to
right.
need assistance to do that. But what are the major functions that we need for this organization, such as human resources, student services, whatever, food services, whatever else comes to mind that she's seen or has experience with that are effective in an organization of this size and magnitude. And then we take it from there, we decide what we want to do with that from there.
Right, that sounds good.
Is that
Okay. What do you think?
Clear as
No,
mud?
I would say to you that I think just in general, looking at central office, certainly, looking at facilities and operations, looking at what I'm going to call it teaching and learning, for lack of, and then looking at student services, those four large areas, if you will, which encompass a good chunk of what you do in a school district, would be a starting point. And coming back maybe not with, I wouldn't be prepared to come back with models early on.
Right.
But to come back maybe with a proposal of how to approach looking at this. I mean, you know, similar to what we provided to the Budget and Finance Subcommittee today on capital planning. You know, what would it look like, a timeline and process? And in some instances, I could do this at the next meeting. Who, if any, I would need to engage to look at this. I certainly think there needs to be a review of whether or not we have job descriptions that exist for current positions, looking at the districts of our size, you know, getting some comparisons, studying, you know, what are the best needs for the way we want to deliver educational programming, having conversations with the building administrators. And it's something I'm sure, and talking with some of the central office administrators, and maybe coming back with more a proposal for how to approach it. If you would like me to look at those large kind of, those four areas, I guess, would be my comfort level. But, and maybe in that, being able to do a sense of a timeline for this, because I would think you would want to have something in place or whatever before your permanent superintendent comes on board. But that may, I don't know. So
Okay, thank you. That sounds
that
good.
makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So we'll move right along, and consideration to elect delegate to MASS/MASC Joint Conference. Now, Elaine, you will be going, right, to the conference? And Mary, anyone else going? Okay, so between you two, who wants to be the delegate?
The only concern that I have is that they've moved it to Friday afternoon, and I'm not too sure at the moment. I believe they moved it to Friday afternoon.
They did. I have to leave Friday morning.
Yeah. I would suggest that you can put my name down. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stay for the entire thing. I have to come back to be at someplace else on Saturday morning.
So they're going to have the meeting, the last, Friday?
Traditionally, the delegate assembly has always been Friday afternoon.
Right.
And then they moved it to Wednesday. And what they're finding is that, to some degree, a lot of people, if they're only able to attend the conference for one day,
Yeah.
it's usually that they can go on
Because
Friday.
I know when I attended, it was always Friday, the
Right.
last.
So it's moved to Friday.
Well, I'll nominate, go ahead.
I may be able to go for one day. I just couldn't go for the 3 days.
You don't have, some people go specific, if they only have one day, they might look for specific workshops.
Okay.
And they can go that day. You can always go for just a day.
Did you want to go Friday? And then you'd make the delegate, because you're not sure, and Mary said she can't.
We still have a little time. We
Okay,
can do it if
we'll-
Mrs. Terry
we'll-
wants to
we'll
look.
do it next
Yeah,
time.
I will review that tonight.
Okay.
I think
Unless
it's,
we get home at midnight. And
it's
I'll
a-
review it tomorrow.
morning.
it's a very interesting learning experience, and even if you're not a delegate, you can still attend to see how it operates, but
Right.
it's a very interesting experience to participate in,
Okay,
as we've had Mrs. Reed participate in it as well.
all right. I will try for myself.
It's called trial by fire.
Yeah. Psyched about that. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll table that until next time. Superintendent of Schools search sample process and MASC or NESDEC, or we could have both come in to speak. It's what you would like to do. Are we going to handle it ourselves, or are we going to go for help? It's up for discussion. And we should start early. Any thoughts? Do you want MASC to come in to speak with us to see what they can do for us in NESDEC?
I'm not familiar with what they would do for us, so it might be helpful for them to
Yeah,
explain.
Both groups would come in and do their presentation to you. It's about a 40-minute presentation of what services they can provide. The entire comprehensive service, meaning from start to finish, or pieces of it that you would like, and they would do that, no cost. They come in, and then you would have to,
And for a fee, then we would hire them if we
at
wanted
least you would
them
have an
to do.
understanding of
Right.
what does the process typically look like, how long does it take, what elements would they do, whether you would want to hire someone just do the start to the finish or not. I can tell you that I did a little bit of research, that's why I included that information, did a little bit of research today. Hingham Public Schools is going out for superintendent. Their longtime superintendent, Doc Gallo, is retiring. Their process is such that it looks like, although I read it, while it's being advertised, and the organizations will advertise, even though you don't hire them, will list your ad, will on their websites. They'll assist you in doing the application, the brochure, and everything else if you want. Just do that part. They'll do focus groups, or they'll do soup to nuts. Their process, it's about a 4-month window to do a process. About 120 days roughly is what most groups will tell you. You could speed it up a little bit, but when you run into Christmas vacation, it makes it a little bit more difficult. They're just starting their process. Their process will run from September. They hope to appoint in January. It gives them the window that if they should not find a successful, a candidate in January, they could go back out again. There's a different pool of candidates looking typically September to January than you get in the second half of the year. It's very interesting to watch that. So, it really, the choice is yours. If you're going to do it yourself, I know from my own experience being a school committee member and doing it, it's pretty, you got to have a lot of time. That's the issue. You've really got to have a lot of time. And I think the hardest part is to really get your focus groups and do all of that and gather that information.
I think what we should do first to have these two come in, the MASC and NESDEC. What do you think? Come in, we'll listen to what they have to offer us. Do you think that's would be our first step?
I think so.
Except that does that screw up our timelines if we don't even have them come in until the 26th of September to talk to us, and we really want to start this process in September.
Well, you're not going to probably, you're exactly right, start the process. You'd be looking at probably, if you were able to get them to come in, you could schedule two, one behind the other, or, an hour apart, if you will, and do that. And then, given that, you'd have to make a decision whether or not you wanted to engage them in the search process and put that together, and because you're looking for, obviously, RFP or I would assume, request for proposal to do that. And I would say that in effect, by the time you engage them and then get them to either work with you, if you have not drawn up a brochure and or a write-up for what you're looking at, for what your needs are for the superintendent, then you're probably looking at the 1st of November, maybe end of October, by the time you get it out there and advertise. So that gives you a closing date of end of February, which it's good to get off as soon as possible and try to get it done with by February, particularly if you're dealing with a sitting superintendent and your selection is a sitting superintendent who may or may not have a 90 to 120 day notice. That's the other thing that you have to kind of think about. So it's probably about the time that some districts start. I don't know that any start out of the block unless unless they've been meeting in the summer to do that. So it's not atypical that you start September, October. I think you're a little bit under the crunch to get it, but not impossible. It's not like Mask and NESDEC have not done this before. They've got all the templates and they've got the resources, and once they meet with you, they can turn around the profile of the district for the brochure, the application, any questions that you may want to ask candidates in the whole package, and you can get it out on all of their websites and anywhere else you want to advertise it very quickly. It doesn't take a long time to do that. It takes longer probably if you're doing that yourself, unless you have the time to do that. That's the caveat to that. But.
I have a question. As a new member here, one of the things that I've noticed is that we generally hire from within, and we really try to promote the staff that we have. So if that is at all a possibility, should you open it to internal candidates first, where you may already have a wonderful candidate that could take this position, and then you've now alleviated all this extra?
We did that for Sean Gilrain. We did that. He was an internal candidate, and we did not advertise outside. So, it's up to the committee. It's whether you guys want to do that or not, or go out. Any suggestions?
I wouldn't be opposed to that, to put it out first as opposed to internal, see what we have, and decide if we want to go further.
I'm going to just throw this out there, having been through this twice. Twice in the perspective of having the search for Mr. Gilrain left, and then the search for the interim position. I think it's important to look at what it is that you need, what it is that the district requires, and how best that you move forward in the interests of students, and what in the two experiences that I had, that's an area where I feel that the school committee could give better guidance to search committees as to what it is that their objective is. So when we did this, when Mr. Gilrain left, you were putting an internal candidate against external candidates, and it isn't an equal it isn't an equal assessment when you're looking at that. If the committee's desire is to only look at whether or not there is a certified candidate from within in promoting the person, and looking at that in not considering all of those other things, which is what are the needs of the district and how do we move the district forward, then I don't disagree that the search can be very, very quickly done because we have 5 people in the district that have certifications. So we would have those interested parties competing against each other for that. I will just speak from, my own personal opinion that I think that it is a disadvantage to bring people into this role. There's a really big leap from climbing a bunny hill, okay, going down a bunny hill at a ski slope and going down a black diamond course, going from an administrator to a superintendent position. That is what is happening across the state. People are going into roles with, in finding this catalyst, and that's the reason why superintendents are not staying, and they're moving, and they're moving, and they're moving. I think that I feel strongly about building a pathway and a culture from within to prepare people to go into that role of now not being responsible for 400, 500, 600 people. Now I'm being responsible for 5,000 people, and I'm being responsible for $50 million budget, and I'm being responsible for the political climate that you walk into with individual town government and state government, and setting those people up for success. So I think it's important for people to express their opinion. There's a lot of work that's done in participating in a search committee for a superintendent, and I've participated in both. If we want to focus solely on an internal candidate, we can do that, and it eliminates a lot of work. Typically, when you're looking at candidates, Mrs. Reed and I went out and did site visits. Days of going out to do site visits. You want to put people on an equal playing field to do that. If we're looking internally, then we can streamline the entire process. I think it's difficult to do an internal and do an external search if you don't have an intent to fully. Would you be willing to make a choice of, yes, we have this great internal candidate that I really like, but gee, I just met this person who works in XYZ district, and I'm going to put that person over the internal candidate. I'm being very honest, just because if that's what we choose to do is work from within, then let's make that decision now, and then there is no need to bring in MASC in the other company. But if you really want to look at first having the conversation, what is it that we're looking for the next 3 to 5 year period, and how are we looking at leading one cycle into the next cycle? It's going to be unlikely, it would be rare, and we have been rare in many things, that you're going to get the next superintendent for 10 years in Dudley-Charlton. And here's the biggest caveat for that. It's not that we don't all love this district, but the job is extremely overwhelming. I think Dr. Nash will back me up on this one. And we are not in a position to pay superintendents as their experience gains. So if someone has career growth aspirations, they're going to leave us anyway, because we're going to be capped. If you have a superintendent that is on the North Shore that's making $220,000, and our cap is going to be around 150 to 160, and you have superintendents that are making 190 for half the workload that we have, that's the reality we have to work at. Our pathway is building that pathway of training, building, and allowing our people to grow and move, but putting them in a pathway for success.
I still think, Elaine, that we need to, is that okay? I still think that we do need to have that conversation first about where we want to go, and does it fit in, and then looking at those internal candidates, do they match that?
Correct.
I don't know.
The stepping stone generally is that you define the qualities and characteristics of what you want in your next superintendent, but it's not just done by your school committee, it's done by your focus group. So you bring in all of your stakeholders. You bring in your parents, you bring in your administrators, you bring in your staff, and they tell you the qualities and the characteristics. that you're looking for in your next superintendent, which then give you, a starting point, if you will. It's part of the process anyway. I think if you're correct, if you're going to do an internal search, then you do an internal search.
Right.
But maybe you need to look at what you want first,
Right.
which is what I think you were probably saying.
Right, and it's not been the way we approached it the last 2 times. So we've, we didn't do focus groups the first time. We just went out and we advertised and we went and did it. And when we did the interim, the committee was charged with going, in this search committee for the interim position, we were making assumptions on what we thought the school committee wanted us to do. Were they right or wrong? I don't know. But, we were lucky that the administrators came into the search committee and said, we talked and these are some of the things that we're looking for. But we didn't go beyond those levels to what Dr. Nash is saying. So is that something that you want to do now? I think it's a really, it's a unique situation that we're in right now. And I think it's important that we look prospective of what it is that you want before we just post a position and go off and hire somebody without thinking long range down the road where we are. I mean, we were very, lucky that with Mr. Desto coming in, some of the decisions and the moves that he made, he left us in a very good financial situation, but it is not a permanently good financial situation. It's a temporary good financial situation. So, looking ahead.
Well, Kathy and I have been here for over 30 years.
Well, some of them.
And so we've gone through many superintendents. So far, it's always been from within. And we
Well, no, there was one that was out.
Yes.
Lasted a year.
Who lasted a year. And we did have MASC do that search for us. And he lasted a year and he disappeared in the night. And he was not, I'm really focused on from within because these people have a feeling. And we've always been so successful in Dudley-Charlton and with the little that we've had in money. And that's been going on for 30 years. And so I think we would have to make a decision, as you said, Elaine, this evening, because otherwise we're going to waste our time if some people want from within and some do not. Go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion so that we can move it along? I think that we should make our recommendation or request to Dr. Nash to have these 2 groups come into our next meeting, because it won't set us back if we ultimately end up doing internal, because that's going to be a quicker process. But if we haven't made that decision, we can't be held back to look at these 2 groups and what they might bring forth to us. And so if they are scheduled to meet with us at our next meeting, or not that I want to come back out to another meeting, but maybe we make it a meeting that isn't this normal meeting, so that we're not out so late. We hear from those 2 groups what they have to offer, what they believe is available out there to us for people looking in a superintendent situation. And then if we still, as a committee, opt to look internally, and I would like to add, when we talked about this when we were deciding interim or not, there wasn't a lot of candidates, if any, that had interest in this role. So I don't know if other people.
I disagree with you, Mrs. Terry.
Yes.
Okay, well, I
Right.
believe that I spoke to people about it, but
No,
anyway,
I disagree too. Well, I don't know. I think I would follow what Elaine said, because it's a waste of time to have these people come in and then all of a sudden we're going to say, we want to try to hire from within and see what we have first. We don't have to advertise, we just advertise within. So if the majority of the committee is for that, then we'll start with that. Otherwise, we'll have the MASC and the NESDEC come in. So what do you think? I mean,
I would just have to say, I think we're going at this incorrectly, because you have to decide what you want first before you determine whether or not you're looking for an internal or an external, or you're going to open it up to both. we have to have a very thorough conversation, not just what the job description is, but what you're looking for, skill sets and qualities of the next leader of this district that's going to always be challenged with fiscal restraints. You're going to need to look for somebody that's going to be able to grow this district beyond the budget constraints. So it's not simply we're going to hire somebody to fill the role of a superintendent based on a job description. You have to look for someone who's going to come in and tell you what their vision is of how this district is going to move forward. So I think to the piece Dr. Nash has brought up is that you need to look at talking to not only we as a committee, because it's our responsibility to hire, but we need to listen to our administrators, we need to look at our teachers, we need to look at what our communities are doing, and you have to have that conversation, not just we're gonna fill a role. I wanna know what role I'm looking to fill. So I think that conversation needs to happen, to your point, if that needs to be a meeting that we sit down and we just talk about that and we look to the future. That's fine. To look at companies coming in and what they can and can't do for us, I think, I mean, I'm very comfortable with what I know with what MASC does. I'm very interested in speaking to what the other company does and what they offer. And, you know, and look at that, and I think you can be very quickly in a position by mid-October to decide which pathway you want to take, which then allows you to move forward with posting and with time frame. And I still feel, having sat on the search committee and being very involved, Mrs. Reed and I were both on the search committee, that the search committee made a very definite decision to only look at interim candidates. And through the waiver process, had we not decided to focus on someone who could come into us with experience, there are candidates that were on that table that I would have brought in for an interview. And I believe Mrs. Reed, I mean, we were knee deep into every word, every I, and every, you know, dotted T when we were doing the waiver application. There were people that I would most definitely have gone back and interviewed. Do you agree or not?
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. That's why I'm shaking my head, yes, but,
So how would we go about doing those focus groups in a timely fashion? Would one of these organizations do that, or would somebody here do that?
It's not only a focus group, but you can actually do it through a survey process. I mean, you could do Survey Monkeys questionnaires. That's what Mr. Kuchar did when he was doing the review of the central office. Was he did, you know, I believe he did Survey Monkeys and allowed people to fill in and supply information. That's a way that you can open up to all your administrators. It's a way you can open up to your parents and your community, as we're looking for your input on, you know, the next superintendent role. I have been contacted by community members that said, I want to be considered to be part of the search for the next superintendent. If we're eliminating that whole process, how do we allow their voice to come into filling that next role?
Right, but somebody has to do that. Somebody has to do the Survey Monkey or whatever we're doing.
Absolutely.
So that's number one. And my other thought is that I would like, number one, to define what it is that we're looking for first, and I would like to find the best candidate possible to fulfill that need, whether it is internal or external. So I'm not a proponent of only looking for internal candidates, because that might not be the right person for the job. They may be the right person for the job, but we don't know that yet. So I think that we would be limiting ourselves by just looking at internal candidates, or just looking for external candidates for that matter. I just think that we need to approach this, as Mrs. Rabbit stated, first defining what it is that we're looking for, and then finding the best person for that job based on our criteria.
Catherine, what are your thoughts?
Like I said, I wouldn't be opposed to term, but I think, and I made the motion 5 years ago, regardless of who's picked for finalists, I think the internal candidate should be given the courtesy of an interview in the
Right.
final round, regardless of who the finalists are. I think any internal candidate should be given a chance
Right.
to come to the final table interview.
And I agree.
I agree.
That doesn't mean
I
kind of
think
other
we
people,
all
but
agree
Michelle,
on that,
yeah.
right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So, well, then we will get in the MASC and NESDEC to see, but we have to work on what we're looking for.
Right.
So do you think we can get them in for our next meeting?
We can check, if not.
Or should it be a
yeah.
special night?
Yeah, if not, I'll have to get back and talk with
And-
you
right.
as to what,
And then we'll-
special.
Right.
Well, we should,
Your next meeting is the
26th.
26th.
Yeah.
We can contact them tomorrow and see what their availability is. Would you want to start any earlier? Maybe, do you want to start at 7, schedule a 7 to 8, and maybe an 8:15? Or we can, separate meeting?
Is there a possibility that we can start the meeting earlier? And
Like at
then,
6
and then,
Oh.
and I don't know about other people, but if
We can also try to keep the agenda light,
Yeah.
so that, at that meeting, so that.
Can
we're
we,
not-
can we all come in at 6? We probably could start an hour earlier.
on the 26th.
On the
Doesn't matter to me at all.
26th, I can,
Even earlier than that.
you can?
Yeah, I can too.
Okay.
Well, let us
Nan,
check on the
everybody?
availability.
Okay, let's
of
hope.
NESDEC and Mass to come in on the 26th and see what their time frame is, you know.
What's the earliest you could get here, would you say?
Yeah.
I'll make
She
it work
said
then.
6, she
Well,
could,
they said they could come in earlier, they said
We'll
they could
make it
come in
earlier if we have to.
Could you have a, could you have a separate, could you have a special meeting
Yeah.
to do
Just do
just
this,
these
yeah.
people,
Right,
like
that's what I
between
meant.
4 and 5:30, and then, or, you know, 5 and 6:30, and then do this at 7, or however the timeframe
You
is?
probably want to schedule about an hour by the time you have
so it would
questions,
be
you
5
know.
to 7, because our regular meeting starts at
Right.
7,
Right.
so
And
we'd
then
have to, it'd have to be
We could do
5.
that. So let me check on the availability on the 26th, and I'll get back to the chair. If I get, some other date where both are available. We're dealing with 2 groups, and you want to do both at the same night, so.
Right.
We'll say we may have to go to a special meeting for that. But I would say if you schedule about an hour for each, you know, given the fact that you probably have about a 35-minute presentation, maybe not that, and then you'll have questions, you know, I'm sure, for each of them, so.
And I'm sure they will have information on what we should be looking for too. That's, okay? So everybody will do that for next time.
Can I suggest that we all be thinking about what it is that we look for, and maybe, I don't know if the interim search superintendent job description was any different than the job description that we used for 5 years ago, but maybe if we could ask Mrs. Sullivan to send that out to us, and we could take a look at it, and then see if there's anything else that we want to be thinking about.
Okay, next item on the agenda, consideration of request for non-resident enrollment. Dr. Nash.
Yes. This evening, you have a request from Scott Holland, who is here this evening in the audience, who is in as a long-term sub in physical education for Kevin Foley. He's asking the school committee to allow his 3 younger children, grades 8, 5, and 3, to attend the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District. This is before you because Scott and I had met, and he, coming in as a long-term sub, is not covered under, as I indicated to you, the collective bargaining agreement, because it excludes long-term subs as well as some other areas, so therefore does not have the benefit of enrolling his students, his children, in school. So
No,
he's-
he has one child, doesn't he?
He has one
here?
child, one student here at the high school under school choice, right? So as I explained to him, he would have to come to you to waive your policy that you currently have, JF, regarding school admission residency, so Scott is
So it's
here.
up for discussion. Yes, come on up, Scott. And you have a daughter in school choice, 9th grade? or-
She's in 10th.
Okay.
Yeah, so she was here at the school choice last year.
Okay.
But I'll just read what I wrote. So
Okay.
I said, good evening, my name is Scott Holland. I live at 5 Blueberry Lane in Webster, Mass. I'm starting my second year teaching phys ed at Charlton Middle School. I'd like to thank the committee and Dr. Nash for the consideration of my request. My wife Nikki and I have 4 children, Maria, who's a sophomore at Shepherd Hill, Romeo, who's in 8th grade, Nicolina, who's in 5th, and Gianna, who's in 3rd grade. My request tonight is that they're granted enrollment to Charlton Middle and Heritage respectfully. My position at Charlton Middle School is a full-time position where I've been teaching phys ed and performing all the duties of a full-time teacher would perform. I intend to be in the district long-term, really enjoy the professionalism, the professional environment, and like any parent, I want the best for my children. The district has an outstanding learning environment and have teachers that really care about their students. This is the type of environment I want my kids to grow up in, and I ask you please to give them the chance to be a part of this great community.
And this year you're a permanent sub, right?
Yes.
Long-term sub for the year.
So, do I have a motion to
I'll make
accept
a motion
this?
for discussion to allow the 3 children to attend Dudley-Charlton for discussion purposes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
I'm looking at the letter of the contract. It says substitute. It doesn't say long-term substitute. Isn't there really a difference? Is that, when I read this as substitute teacher, I think of that as a day-to-day person, might come in Monday, might come in Friday, as opposed to a long-term sub who is actually in the district.
And actually doing the work
It's
of
actually
a
a teacher,
full-time
just happens
teacher.
to be here for the substitute, but it's really not. It's kind of like in between. So I'm just asking for clarification, what do you think that means?
Me?
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
negotiate this
that's it.
contract, but I can tell you,
Yeah.
a sub is a sub is a sub, whether they're in my eyes, whether they're here for 45 days, 90 days, daily, or long-term.
Yeah.
It means that they
Right,
are a
right.
substitute. They are not, let me say this, they do not hold a permanent position. That's what a sub is.
Right.
And I don't delineate it differently, and I don't know that the language did. Your language also excludes, other people. For
Right,
example, ESL teachers are excluded, and yet they're teachers. So.
But
that's-
he's
that's-
doing,
yeah.
I know he's
Right,
a
right.
sub, but he's doing a whole year and taking the place of a regular teacher.
Right.
And so, and you're getting first-year teacher salary, right?
Correct.
Yes. your
So he's on
language-
that
right.
scale.
Right.
If I may, we have 2 issues before the committee, really. One is contract, teacher contract. And the verbiage that we put in very carefully in the teacher contract had to do with allowing full-time or teachers that are on the contract to have their children join the school district. And there is also language in there for them to notify us by May 1st that they intended to do that. The other is that we have a policy. So there's, the contract issue is one item, and then we have a policy in place as well. So, again, I caution the committee that we are continuously moving against our own policies at every single meeting.
Any other discussion?
I have a question. Did you know in May that you were gonna be a long-term sub?
Not officially.
So that wouldn't have even given him the opportunity to have presented that to us for review at that point.
Be that as it may, his position is still a substitute and does not fall within the criteria of what we put forward.
Any other discussion? So, no other discussion, we'll take a vote on it.
I just have it, this
Okay.
is just throwing out that, the question, if those 3 children were allowed here, next year you don't have the job here, that means they have to be pulled out and go back to Webster.
Yeah.
Because they're not here for life, so to
Yeah,
speak.
correct.
It's only as long as
Yeah.
you're, because I think we never really cleared that up in the contract, if a teacher's here, let's say the teacher goes off to another district.
Right.
Is the kid automatically withdrawn? Does the contract actually address
They
that?
would
It
no
really
longer
doesn't.
be covered by your contract.
So therefore,
Yeah.
the student would have to leave.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to put that out there.
Only in
That's a
school
good
choice,
clarification.
only
Yeah.
in school choice, once you admit.
I know
that
school choice,
you
but I'm
own them
talking, you're right, but I'm
for
talking about if
their
a
career,
person comes
right.
out.
Can I ask another question? I understand we talked about that the policy, I don't know if it's a written policy or you guys made the decision that school choice would only be offered for 9th grade and up. Is that a written policy?
No, we do have to vote every year on that.
We have to vote
So that
every
was
year.
voted in May.
For the next year, we have to do it again every
Yes.
May, yeah.
Okay, so that's already set in stone, it's
Right.
nothing that could be applied for?
No.
Yeah.
Just, I know we said there was some open
And then,
spots.
if we had openings, which we don't do anymore, if we had openings in the lower level, school choice, once a sibling's here, the others can go, if you have openings, but we didn't. We don't have openings because we don't do that. But his daughter is school choice for the high school. Dean?
Can I just make reference to the point, I think Mr. Holland said it earlier. Mr. Holland did serve in the capacity as a full-time teacher last year for substitute pay, I believe, at an amount that I don't need to discuss at this point in time. Did the full duties, did the planning, did the grading, did everything we asked for. As we were waiting for information on whether the individual was gonna come back again, we had to wait before we could offer up a potential hiring again for Mr. Holland. I can tell you all in front of me right now, if the position does come up again, he's gonna be a top choice for me to fill this spot. He's that good with the kids. He's done an amazing job, and I just wanted to make sure I said that publicly before you make your final
Yeah,
decision.
thank you.
Okay, thank
Well, I
you.
think
Thank you,
that's-
Dean.
I think
I think
Mrs.
that
Perry
means
said
a
that.
lot.
The May 1st, we really couldn't hold that against him, so to
No.
speak, because the job was up in the air.
And he may be full-time
Next year, but we don't know yet.
next year. So, any other discussion before we take a vote? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
Can we define what we're voting on, please?
We're voting on, Kathy made the motion
To
to
allow.
allow,
To waive
to
your
approve.
policy.
To waive the
Thank you.
policy, though. Well, not the
Yeah.
policy, the.
No, the policy, it's school committee policy. He's not covered under Article
Right,
23,
okay. So,
but to waive your school committee policy, because you do have
Kathy had made that,
exceptions.
we'll have to say that motion, because you made the motion to allow the
my
student.
motion is the positive.
Okay.
To allow them by waiving the policy, which is what policy letter?
Policy JF,
Which
Okay.
says,
school admission residency.
And allowing his
children to-
children to come into the school, okay? So this is the vote that's gonna allow the kids.
Thank you.
And we're waiving the policy.
well, I'm gonna add a line to my motion,
Okay.
okay? Because he is a extended employment substitute. That is, I think it's different from a substitute. It is a different title,
Right,
so that's why I'm adding that to my motion.
okay. And I have, who was the second on that?
I agree
Okay,
with what she said.
okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes,
What school are we planning your children on going to?
he did say Charlton.
Charlton Middle School and Heritage. A 5th and 8th in Charlton and Heritage 3rd.
Heritage had 20, 21. That's what. May I ask a clarifying question?
Go ahead.
In your letter, you state extended employment substitutes under this classification will receive similar benefits as those outlined in the agreement between the Dudley-Charlton Regional School District and the Dudley-Charlton Teachers Association. And it says, i.e., for et cetera, 8 sick days, 2 personal days.
Those are the benefits. And
Those are
only
only
those.
the
They're going by
benefits.
the
Right,
contract
that's what
there
IE means.
for his benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
I did speak to Dr. Nash about this earlier, when Scott approached me. And one of the things that we spoke about was that the policy of the school committee really makes a nice distinction between a substitute, and I understand a substitute is a substitute, but there is your own policy which has an extended employment sub being entitled, who's hired for a full year with salary verification form and placed on step 1 of the agreement. So that there is that verbiage where Teachers Association Appendix A salary, recognizing the status, it says extended employment subs under this classification will receive benefits as those outlined in the agreement. The problem is, it says EIE, meaning, and it says sick leave, 2 personal days, associated health benefits. And as Dr. Nash and I discussed, it's really 2 letters. If it said EG, it would
That's a
be
big difference.
including all.
Right.
Instead, it says IE. So
Yeah, there is a difference.
I think there is a difference between just someone who comes in every day to someone who's,
Right.
put
There
there.
is.
That's why I put in my
So-
motion. I don't consider him a substitute. I
No.
consider him a first-year teacher.
And he is getting the benefits, and he's getting the personal days, so that's all in the contract for a regular teacher.
No, it's different.
Thank you.
It's different in that you have a policy that outlines
Correct.
what step I can put, because you remember you
Right,
have to do an
right,
exception
but-
to that.
Right.
And the benefits are not the same in that the sick days are different for a permanent teacher as well as any other benefits.
Correct,
So,
correct.
yeah,
I'm
so
not
it's
questioning
different.
that. I
No.
just thought,
It's
I
just-
just wanted to be sure that it's understood that, by
Right.
your own policy, there is a true distinction between just someone who's a sub and who, by your own language, says an extended employment. So, thank you for your.
Any other questions before we take the vote? Okay, no questions, all in favor? Opposed? You're abstaining? So, it lost.
It's a no vote.
It's a no vote. Okay. Next meeting dates.
We got one
No,
more,
you
the home
have one
instruction.
Oh,
Jay.
okay. Now I'm in a rush.
Pauline, can I
Con-
ask a point of clarification?
What?
If it was 3-3,
It's a no vote.
That's
Yeah,
no
it's a
vote.
no vote?
That's
There's
no
no
vote,
tiebreaker?
because that's
There's
it.
a vote.
okay.
There's
Great,
no
just wondering.
tiebreaker. Usually the chair's the tiebreaker. We have 7 on the committee. It's just tie. That means Robert's rules that it's no vote.
Okay.
Okay. Consideration of requests for home instruction, policy IHBG. Dr. Nash.
You have a request in your packet for 8 more homeschooling requests from families. Consistent with the school committee policy, I will not be reading the names, but you have them listed. Some are new requests and some are renewals.
Make a motion to accept all the home instructions presented tonight.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. It's unanimous, Sandy. And next meeting dates, school committee meetings, Wednesday, September 22nd. And I'll leave the time right now. We're not sure of the time. We might have a separate 5 to 7, and then our regular school committee will start at 7. If we can get the MASC and the NASDAQ, okay? Budget and Finance Subcommittee will be Wednesday, October 10th. That'll be at the Shepherd Hill, 5 p.m. And our meeting on September 22nd will be at Charlton Middle School. 26th. Will be at Charlton Middle School. Future agenda items, budget is one of them. Who would like to add something? Elaine?
Dr. Nash and Mr. Matthew will be coming back about the house doctor.
Okay.
We're going to revisit the delegate for the conference. I'd like to discuss putting the policy subcommittee on the agenda and look at the schedule for starting that.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'm sure we will think of others.
Members, if I might ask, of the policy subcommittee, who are the members?
Mrs. Santos.
Mary and Elaine.
Thank you.
So we can meet during the day.
Good.
Okay, at this time, we will enter into executive session for reason 4, to discuss the deployment of security personnel or devices or strategies with respect thereto. And now I will take a roll call. Jamie?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay. We're in executive session.